Chapter 2649. Escaped. Those three grand ultimate gods were surprised that an Earth ultimate god who they had not cared for before ruined their plan. The Earth ultimate god displayed the transmigration world, which allowed the Scorpion King to destroy the formation. The most devastating part was the Earth ultimate god ended up taking the interspatial ring containing the blood gems away, and they could not even chase after him. After a while, "Forgive me, Master, please forgive me." A purple-robed man fearfully knelt while begging for mercy. This person was Genie Hong. He was afraid of being involved when the war broke out, so he found a mineshaft and hid in it. In the end, he was discovered and brought to face the three grand ultimate gods. This person is also from Crimson Stone Fort? Bai Tu glanced at Genie Hong and said with his indifferent voice, "Yes, Master. He's an inspector from Crimson Stone Fort according to him and is related with Jin Yen, one of the faction leaders in Crimson Stone Fort," replied a heaven ultimate god respectfully. "Oh, Jin Yan's man?" Bai Tu raised his brows and glanced at Genie Hong again before smiling strangely. Jin Yen was a famous and powerful man in the Crimson Stone Fort as a high-level grand ultimate god, much stronger than the Scorpion King or any of them present. They would have to show Jin Yen some respect if they ever met. Genie Hong was a joke in comparison. "Answer me, who's Jian? Is he also from Crimson Stone Fort?" Bai Tu asked in a cold voice. "Jian?" Genie Hong was stunned but immediately shook his head. "He's not from Crimson Stone Fort, but the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. His official army was guarding the mining sites as those blood gems had appeared within his territory." Territorial Lord? Bai Tu and the other two grand ultimate gods exchanged looks. They thought Jian Yi was some super genius from the Sacred Palace. Unexpectedly, Jian Yi was just a territorial lord. How could a territorial lord be so capable? Although Jian is only a territorial lord, he's extremely talented. He was just a peak ultimate god when I first saw him many years ago, who then defeated me as a peak Earth ultimate god in the end. He became a peak Earth ultimate god 5 years ago and fought evenly against a heaven ultimate god from Crimson Stone Fort called Qing Zhe at one instance before the Scorpion King had to step in. I am unsure the reason, but Scorpion King had personally shown Jian Yi his masterstroke, 9 asteroids, said Genie Hong. He spilled all the beans. A peak ultimate god who defeated a high-level Earth ultimate god and was appreciated by the Scorpion King to the point he showed Jian Yi his masterstroke. Gu Ji, Bai Tu, and Li Qinji looked at each other with solemn expressions. I can be sure that Jian Yi is indeed a genius. They must have been in contact since the Scorpion King showed his masterstroke to Jian Yi. The Scorpion King might have even persuaded him to join the Sacred Palace. The Scorpion King didn't hesitate to hand the interspatial ring to Jian Yi right before his death and had great confidence in him. Jian Yi will find a way to return it to the Crimson Stone Fort since the interspatial ring has fallen into his hands. He'll most probably hand the ring over to the new fort master, In Sewer, said Gu Ji coldly. We should never let him return to Crimson Stone Fort. Bai Tu bellowed in a low voice. Hunt him down. Do everything possible to find, kill, and retrieve the interspatial ring from him. Li Qianji was full of murderous intent. Do you know Jian Yi's specific origin or who are his associates? Gu Ji asked. Jin Yi Hong honestly answered their every question. It did not take long for many experts from the Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect to be sent out. The first place they went was the Territorial Lord Mansion in Northern Darkstar Territory. A few days later, Jian Wushuang kept his aura undetected while hiding in a cave which he cracked open in the depths of a dense forest at an unknown distance from the Blood Gems mineral vein. He was holding up a message token in his hand. Shiner, are you all right? Jian Wushuang asked. I'm okay. Xiao Tiexin immediately replied to the message. I left the Territorial Lord's mansion and then disguised myself to leave the Northern Darkstar Territory as soon as I received your message. There were a large number of experts who appeared in the void above the Territorial Lord's mansion not long after I left. There were only a few maids left in the mansion, so the experts could not get anything and left shortly. Well, where's the official army? Jian Wushuang asked. I've contacted Commander Song Heng and received news that we didn't lose many people in the army. They have currently been divided into several small groups and are resting in some deserted areas without rushing to return to their camps, said Xiao Tiexin. That's good. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. The Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect are on the lookout for me. I want return to the Northern Dark Star territory for the time being. The official army isn't a threat, so they should be able to return to their camps after those experts from Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect leave. However, those experts will try to get you and use you as a threat for me to show up since you're my maid, the person closest to me. You don't have to go back to Northern Dark Star territory for now. On the contrary, you shouldn't show up anywhere for the time being and have to disappear. Do you understand? Jian Wushuang asked. Understood. Xiao Tiexin knew what to do. Master, you don't have to worry about me. I'm just a maid after all. The Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect won't care too much about me. Master, you have to be very careful. I know. I plan to temporarily leave the Northern Darkstar territory and will only be back when I can confidently face the Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect. Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang cut off the transmission after explaining to Xiao Tiexin before sighing in the cave. I thought my Northern Darkstar territory could finally get some peace once the blood gems mining was completed. I can then continue to improve my strength the moment Crimson Stone Fort had taken all of those blood vems and left. Who would have thought there will be such a big change? Jian Wushuang shook his head and sighed. The change had not only affected the Crimson Stone Fort, but also Jian Wushuang and his official army. He had no choice but to find a way out for himself. In the end, he managed to escape but also ran into big trouble. The experts from Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect had seen the Scorpion King handing over the interspatial ring containing all the blood gems to Jian Wushuang. Would they let him off so easily? Scorpion King, Jian Wushuang mumbled softly. Jian Wushuang had a good impression of the Scorpion King. Chapter 2650. 100 million bounty on his head. The Scorpion King happily handed him the 15 divine elixir pill as promised by Crimson Stone Fort when Jian Wushuang first met him. The Scorpion King had also extended an invitation for Jian Wushuang to join the Sacred Palace after noticing Jian Wushuang's great talents. He tried his best to help Jian Wushuang after learning that Jian Wushuang was the person chosen by the Crimson Stone Saint and even gave Jian Wushuang 50 divine elixir pill before also showing Jian Wushuang his masterstroke. Those 50 divine elixir pill and his masterstroke close-up demonstration were helpful to Jian Wushuang and he was grateful. Unfortunately, he was helpless at that moment. He could perhaps save the Scorpion King's life if he unscrupulously used his life rating pressure on those opponents. However, Jian Wushuang knew he could not perform the life rating pressure again. He knew the Scorpion King would be killed after he escaped, so he could only lament the Scorpion King's death. The least he could do was to hand over the interspatial ring with blood gems to the Crimson Stone Fort Master, Yin Suer. Now that everyone knows the interspatial ring is in my hands, the Life and Death Tower and Divine Demons Sect will come after me. Nanwo Palace and Dongfang Clan may have also gotten the news and started looking for me. As for the Crimson Stone Fort, I bet they won't be as indifferent and also began looking for me. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed slightly. The Crimson Stone Fort had too many factions which were constantly in fierce battles against each other. He had no idea how many factions there were altogether and which of them supported Yin Suer. Under such circumstances, he would not hand over the interspatial ring to the expert or go with that person even if a Crimson Stone Fort's expert found him. Therefore, Jian Wushuang could only think of a way to arrive at the Crimson Stone Fort's lair by himself and meet Yin Suer in person to hand over the interspatial ring. It seems he'll need an escape master plan, murmured Jian Wushuang before he soon left. Half a month later at Longyu City. Longyu City was an extremely unique giant city in the Northern Darkstar territory which did not belong to any wilderness or, in other words, the city that was equivalent to a wilderness itself. In the Northern Darkstar territory, many spatial passages could be used for spatial transmission, but most of those spatial passages were only good for short-distance transmissions between the wildernesses. There were only 2 larger spatial passages that could handle transmissions between stellar regions. One of those two larger spatial passages was in the northern Dark Star continent, which Jian Wushuang used to set off to the Narcissus territory. The other one was located in Longyu City. Many cultivators were gathered in a lively tavern inside of Longyu City. Longyu City was a popular city to cultivators, with some being powerful experts due to its special geographical location and the existence of a spatial passage. Guys, have you heard about the bounty announced not long ago? Several Ultimate God Realm cultivators had gathered and were discussing recent events. I've heard it, of course. The reward was personally issued by several top forces within the Danyang Holy Domain, with the bounty being the Northern Dark Star Territorial Lord. The reward amount is 100 million primordial stones. In addition, this reward isn't for us to kill the Territorial Lord, but just merely provide information. In other words, all we need to do is to report his whereabouts to those top forces who offered the reward if we luckily happen to see the Territorial Lord. He was only a primary level Earth Ultimate God. Chapter 2651. In disguise. Jian Wushuang did not deliberately conceal his aura, nor did he use the black stone to disguise his divine power breath. One could easily detect his primary level Earth Ultimate God realm had anyone decided to check on him. In addition, his appearance was also deliberately disguised. Who would have thought he was the Territorial Lord? Jian Wushuang stayed in the tavern for a while before leaving after getting more information from the ultimate gods that were chatting away around him. He went directly to the large spatial passage in Longyu City after leaving the tavern. The spatial passage was on a huge plaza where a large number of cultivators gathered on the plaza and waited in line. Some experts were guarding. There were some experts guarding over the spatial passage near the entrance. Jian Wushuang initially wanted to use this spatial passage for interstellar region transmission, so he could save a lot of traveling time to the Crimson Stone Fort. However, he changed his mind as soon as he arrived at the plaza. The security is too tight, with experts hiding in the dark. Jian Wushuang solemnly pondering. His ability to perceive danger was extremely strong and could vaguely sense two gushes of auras hidden in the void nearby after careful inspection. They belonged to Heaven Ultimate Gods, a high-level Heaven Ultimate God. He knew immediately they were experts sent by the Life and Death Tower and Divine Demons sect. The Life and Death Tower and Divine Demons sect probably assumed he would leave the Northern Darkstar territory and would possibly use spatial passages. Therefore, they had placed some experts on guard around the two major transmission spatial passages that could travel across the stellar regions. Such experts would then very carefully observe everyone who entered the spatial passages. Jian Wushuang would have attracted attention from the two high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods hidden in the void nearby if he was heedless of the danger and casually entered the spatial passage. Even without using the black stone to disguise my aura, my current divine breath is showing a primary level Earth Ultimate God's divine power. Earth Ultimate Gods are scarce in the entire Northern Darkstar territory, so the two high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods will notice me. They'll find out that my appearance has been deliberately disguised if they use their soul power to carefully inspect me, and my whereabouts will most likely be exposed to them. Jian Wushuang thought of the possibilities and made a decision. He immediately turned around and left without looking back. Two figures were standing side by side in the void around the square. They were the two high-level Earth Ultimate Gods who were in hiding. That person over there. He came but turned and left. A red-robed old man squinted at Jian Wushuang's back. The other middle-aged man with purple hair who stood with his hands folded at his back commented, "There's something wrong with his facial muscles. He must have deliberately disguised his appearance, but his aura is very weak at just the primary-level Earth Ultimate God." A primary-level Earth Ultimate God? The two looked at each other before both shook their heads. Jian Yi, the person they were looking for, could simultaneously contend with three primary-level Heaven Ultimate Gods whilst his cultivation realm had reached the peak Earth Ultimate God realm. Though that primary-level Earth Ultimate God was acting a little weird with his face disguised, he could not possibly be the person they were looking for. The two people then allowed Jian Wushuang to leave undetected right under their noses. Jian Wushuang was secretly mumbling and complaining while walking alone on the streets of Longyu City. The Longyu City spatial passage was guarded by the Heaven Ultimate Gods experts. It could be the same for other places, hence I can't rely on the spatial passage and travel to another stellar region. Although it might take a much longer time to get to the Crimson Stone Fort, it's a lower risk. Although I've been reincarnated in the ancient god domain for decades, I haven't explored this place. It's time for me to check this place out and get to know it. In the northern Darkstar territory, the bounty of 100 million primordial stones was shockingly well sought after, as countless cultivators felt tempted by the reward and frantically searched for the northern Darkstar territorial lord, Jin. The reward was soon no longer limited to the northern Darkstar territory, but the entire Danyang Holy Domain. All stellar regions within the Danyang Holy Domain had announced similar rewards. The entire Danyang Holy Domain was enlivened. However, the northern Darkstar territorial lord seemed to have completely disappeared regardless of how many cultivators went all out searching for him with not even the slightest trace of him. Jian Wushuang's close associates such as Xiaotiexin had also disappeared. Jian Wushuang's parents, on the other hand, were located far away in the Wusha wilderness. He had never revealed his true origin and was using his pseudonym, Jian Yi, all along. In addition, the Wusha wilderness was just an unremarkable wilderness that no one paid any attention to, let alone to investigate. Zhui Yunfeng and Luo Xinxin were unaffected by the incident. Time flew. 10 years had passed in a blink of an eye. On a wide piece of land on Wushui territory, Brother Su Han, let's part here. Come visit me at the Qin Mansion if you have time, yelled a silver-haired young man carrying a longsword. Opposite him was a grim-looking man in a black robe. He took a sip of wine before smiling faintly. Young man, practice hard. You have a long way to go in honing your sword skills. I know, Brother Su Han. The silver-haired boy soon left with his tribe. The grim-looking black-robed man called. Su Han was drinking wine while seated on the ground as his eyes flickered. Interesting young man. Su Han was actually Jian Wushuang in disguise. He followed a group of businessmen and encountered the silver-haired young man, Qin Xing, on the way. The very young Qin Xing liked swords and was a little talented in sword principles. Jian Wushang noticed Qin Xing would often practice sword techniques along the journey. On one occasion, Jian Wushuang had just casually given Qin Xing a tip which he caught on and made great improvement. In the following 2 years, Qin Xing was learning sword techniques from Jian Wushuang. It was a pity that Jian Wushuang could not show much of what he knew to hide his strength. Just a few random pointers from him had benefited the young man who had yet to even reach the chaotic realm. Wushui territory, Wushu continent. Jian Wushuang slowly stood up and looked over at the continent he was on with a strange smile appearing on his face. He soon set off and skimmed toward the city right in the middle of the continent and arrived a few days later at a huge and magnificent stone fort constructed entirely of red quicksand. It was the Star-Picking Pavilion. Chapter 2652. Life Liquid. The Star-Picking Pavilion was the first-ranked chamber of commerce in the 9 realms of Golden Crow. They had more than one branch in the Danyang Holy Domain and had a sub-pavilion, of course, within the Wushui territory. Jian Wushuang concealed his aura before slowly walking toward the Star-Picking Pavilion. If he deliberately concealed his divine power breath as a perfect chaotic creature, no one would be able to detect his real abilities. A black chief greeted him immediately as soon as he entered the Star-Picking Pavilion. What do you need? The black chief's attitude was rather humble, as he must have noticed Jian Wushuang's strength. I want to sell something, said Jian Wushuang. Your Excellency, please come with me. The black chief brought Jian Wushuang to a secret room covered by a restriction shield. The black chief asked, What do you want to sell? I'm afraid you can't make a decision regarding the items I'm going to sell, said Jian Wushuang. The black chief was not annoyed at all and smiled instead. If that's the case, please wait a moment while I get the golden chief. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. It did not take long for a golden chief to appear in front of Jian Wushuang after the black chief's departure. The golden chief was a graceful and beautiful woman. The beautiful woman gently asked, My name is Qian Qin and am the golden chief. Your Excellency, how shall I address you? Jian Wushuang replied, Su Han. What treasures do you wish to sell, Master Su Han? Qian Qin humbly asked. I want to sell 2 items. The first is this. Jian Wushuang flipped his hand and took out a green jade bottle which exuded a strong breath of life with a drop of green liquid in it. It was life liquid. This is... As soon as the beautiful woman called Qian Qin saw the green liquid drop, she narrowed her eyes. Is this life liquid? Life liquid. Jian Wushuang raised his brows. He got the green liquid from killing a golden chief of the star-picking pavilion, Yuan Lei, in the Narcissus territory previously. Jian Wushuang had only noticed the treasure was extraordinary but did not know the treasure's name or how valuable it was. He was still unaware the green liquid drop was called the life liquid until that moment. Life liquid contains majestic vitality which can restore a person's vitality in a short time if a seriously injured or dying cultivator consumes it. It's also used as an ingredient for elixir pill refinement in many life-saving elixir pills. In addition, this life liquid is also of great use to cultivators who understand the vitality law. One will be able to work seamlessly with the vitality law if they drink this. It also contains vitality law essence, hence can also be used purely as a meditative treasure. It's indeed a very rare and precious treasure in short. I'll purchase it for 300 million primordial stones if Master Su Han is willing to sell this to the star-picking pavilion, said Qian Qin. Jian Wushuang was astonished. He knew that life liquid was extraordinary, but had not expected it to be so valuable. 300 million primordial stones. The heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon was only sold for 100 million primordial stones. This golden chief knows quite a fair bit. I wonder how Yuan Lei got the life liquid. Jian Wushuang groaned but immediately spoke. I don't need primordial stones. I only need the divine elixir pill. I wonder how many divine elixir pills can the life liquid be exchanged for? Exchange for divine elixir pills? Qian Qin furrowed her brows slightly and she replied after a long time, Master Su Han, this life liquid is very valuable, hence if you can indeed change for divine elixir pill if you wish. However, unlike the primordial stone, divine elixir pills are hard to get. I don't have many in the sub-pavilion, so I can only replace a portion with divine elixir pills using a higher primordial stones exchange ratio. How much can I get? Jian Wushuang asked. This life liquid is worth 300 million primordial stones, but if you want to get some divine elixir pills, I can give you 20 divine elixir pills in addition to 100 million primordial stones, said Qian Qin. Jian Wushuang was stunned. The market price for a divine elixir pill was 5 million primordial stones, but that was the exchange price for divine elixir pills to primordial stones. It was not as simple for the other way round, which was to exchange primordial stones for divine elixir pills. The life liquid valued at 300 million primordial stones could only be exchanged for 20 divine elixir pills and 100 million primordial stones. That 20 divine elixir pills was equivalent to 200 million primordial stones, with the ratio used being 10 million primordial stones to 1 divine elixir pill. I wonder if Master Su Han is willing to proceed with the exchange? Qian Qin smiled and peered at Jian Wushuang. Yes, I am. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. Primordial stones were of no use to him, and he needed the divine elixir pill. Although 20 divine elixir pill was not much, it was enough to increase his divine power by several folds. I have another treasure here which should be more precious than the life liquid. Jian Wushuang smiled before flipping his hand and taking out an item. It was a thumb-sized scarlet blood gem. The scarlet blood gem seems ordinary at first glance. However, the golden chief was so observant that she could recognize the extraordinary blood gem at a glance. It's a royal blood gem. Qian Qin had always maintained a dainty and graceful posture, but her face instantly changed after seeing the royal blood gem. She was shocked by the treasure Jian Wushuang took out. Is it really the royal blood gem? Qian Qin stared at the treasure while her insides were perturbing. Royal blood gems were the main material used to refine holy treasures. It was invaluable not only to ultimate gods but even some haughty undying saints. Undying saints who wanted to refine a piece of holy treasure often paid a great price in search of royal blood gems. Such a precious and rare refinement material had unexpectedly appeared in front of Qian Qin. Master Su Han. Qian Qin looked at Jian Wushuang again with a completely different gaze than before. You should know the function of this royal blood gem. It's an extremely rare treasure. Do you really want to sell it to the star-picking pavilion? Qian Qin was doubtful. That was a royal blood gem after all. Even though it was only thumb-sized, its weight must be at least 10 caddies, which was still worth a frightening sum. The most important issue was not its high value, but the difficulty in finding it, as one could only stumble upon it by luck. Chapter 2653, High-Level Earth Ultimate God. I'll just sell it off, but I want only divine elixir pills for this and not a single primordial stones, replied Jian Wushuang flatly. Please wait for a moment in that case. I have to discuss with the supervisor to determine the final purchase price, said Qian Qin before she turned and left. Purchasing 10 caddies of royal blood gem was not something a golden chief could call the shots. In a dimly lit room, royal blood gem, the purple-robed supervisor of the star-picking pavilion looked solemn. This is the main refinement material for holy treasures. Some among Danyang Holy Domain's top forces may keep some royal blood gems for possible future demands, yet we have someone that wants to sell his royal blood gem to us now. This must be our lucky day. Master, the royal blood gem weighs around 10 caddies. I don't know how much we should pay for it, explained Qian Qin. The purple-robed supervisor asked. He insisted on trading it only for divine elixir pills, right? Qian Qin confirmed, yes. We can only trade up to 300 divine elixir pills in this sub-pavilion. It's obviously not enough to pay for the 10 caddies of royal blood gems. I'll immediately send a message to headquarters and ask them to send us more divine elixir pills. We can offer him 500 divine elixir pills, but he has to wait a few days, said the purple-robed supervisor. 500 divine elixir pills? Isn't it too little? Qian Qin puzzledly asked. Indeed, 500 divine elixir pills aren't enough, but Su Han is probably in dire need of some divine elixir pills. Otherwise, he won't put up something so precious for sale. 500 divine elixir pills may seem slightly less, but he should agree as long as he urgently needs it. If that doesn't work, then add in some primordial stones, suggested the purple-robed supervisor. All right. Qian Qin nodded. She returned to the secret chamber Jian Wushuang was located after a while. Master Su Han, I've discussed with the supervisor in charge, and the star-picking pavilion is willing to purchase this with 500 divine elixir pills, said Qian Qin. 500 divine elixir pills? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He knew the royal blood gem was a rare find and it should be worth more than just 500 divine elixir pills. As he had not come across anyone who urgently needed royal blood gems, so he could only sell it to the star-picking pavilion since 500 divine elixir pills were of great use to him under such circumstances. If Master Su Han thinks the price is too low, star-picking pavilion can top up the offer with 1 billion primordial stones. Qian Qin continued. Perhaps you might not be aware of this, but each sub-pavilion has a limited amount of divine elixir pills. We have to get help from headquarters to send us these 500 divine elixir pills. However, the operation of the star-picking pavilion's operations might be affected if we give out too many divine elixir pills at once. I understand. It'll take 500 divine elixir pills and 1 billion primordial stones. Jian Wushuang was decisive. That's great. Master Su Han, can you wait for a few days? Qian Qin asked. Yes. Jian Wushuang replied with a faint smile. Qian Qin quickly turned and left. There was a wicked smile on her face when she turned around as she was laughing surreptitiously in her heart. Su Han probably has no idea how rare this royal blood gem is, and the price of 500 divine elixir pills and 1 billion primordial stones is ridiculously low. In her opinion, the price offered by the star-picking pavilion was absolutely the lowest in the market. People who are aware of the royal blood gem's value would never sell it, but Su Han agreed to their price. Was he not stupid? She did not know that Jian Wushuang was willing to sell due to his urgency in needing divine elixir pills to improve his strength, but more importantly, he had more of those royal blood gems with him. He had obtained 3 royal blood gems from the mineral vein, and the 10 caddies were the smallest in size. He could not be bothered and gave up on the petty 10 caddies since he had 2 other bigger pieces at hand. Jian Wushuang waited quietly for 5 days in the sub-pavilion until Qian Qin went looking for him again. Master Su Han, here are a total of 520 divine elixir pills and 1,100,000,000 primordial stones in this interspatial ring. You can check on it. Qian Qin handed an interspatial ring to Jian Wushuang. He did a quick check with his mind power and nodded after Jian Wushuang took it. In return, he handed over the 10 caddies of royal blood gem and life liquid to Qian Qin. Master Su Han, it's been a pleasure to trade with you. Qian Qin smiled. Goodbye. Jian Wushuang bid farewell and left. After coming out of the star-picking pavilion, Jian Wushuang immediately found a secluded secret chamber and sat cross-legged in it. The strong-scented divine elixir pills were suspended in front of Jian Wushuang. 520 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang was excited. He had only used around 20 divine elixir pills when he made a breakthrough from peak ultimate god realm to primary level earth ultimate god realm. He then took the 50 divine elixir pills given by Scorpion King during his time at the blood gem mineral vein. In addition to his divine power accumulation from many years of self-cultivation, Jian Wushuang estimated that he would need slightly more than 100 divine elixir pills to make a breakthrough to the high-level Earth Ultimate God realm. Well, let's get started. Jian Wushuang wasted no time as he immediately began to swallow and refine those divine elixir pills at an incredibly fast speed. Any normal ultimate god might take a long time to absorb and refine more than 100 divine elixir pills. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang only had to spend a month refining those 120 divine elixir pills. Thereafter, he managed to make a breakthrough from primary level Earth Ultimate God to the high-level Earth Ultimate God realm. The breakthrough in the cultivation realm had greatly increased Jian Wushuang's divine power and skyrocketed his overall strength. Jian Wushuang did not stop after the breakthrough but continued to swallow and absorb more divine elixir pills until he completely used up the remaining 400 divine elixir pills. Those 400 divine elixir pills had allowed him to accumulate more divine power and brought him a lot closer to the peak Earth Ultimate God realm. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes in the secret chamber and felt his surge of power. My divine power has skyrocketed again and I'll need even more divine elixir pills to improve my cultivation realm. At my current level, I should now be able to wipe out any primary level heaven ultimate god such that even battling against a high-level heaven ultimate god is a walk in the park for me. My winning probability is greatly enhanced if I include my many secret techniques. In terms of improving my law understanding, I can do so with the help from Feng Tian Scroll to progress at a steady speed. Now, what should I do with my sword principles? Jian Wushuang had reached the peak of merit level in Sword World and was only one step away from the profound level of Sword World. However, that one step was not easy to cross over. Chapter 2654, Profound Sword World. My sword world stretches for 100,000 miles as it's the most perfect and powerful sword world capable of competing against profound principle worlds and even suppresses them despite only achieving the merit level. However, my sword world might not be of much use against profound principle worlds that are capable of expanding to similar size. My sword principle understanding is still too low after all. I have to find ways and improve it as soon as possible to the profound sword world. Jian Wushuang murmured. He had been improving at a terrifying rate. His fast-paced progress was mainly due to his understanding of laws and principles being far ahead of his cultivation realm. His cultivation realm was progressing at an astonishing speed, so he would naturally have to improve his laws and principles understanding as soon as possible. The most important matter for him was to achieve the profound sword world. I'm still in the Wushuai territory and it might take decades from here to the Danyang continent where the Crimson Stone Fort lair is located without using the spatial passage. I'm afraid I might not make any further progress in my cultivation realm during this time, so I should focus on understanding laws and principles. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together and made up his mind. Jian Wushuang soon set off on his journey again. While he was on the road, he continued meditating on his laws and sword principles. Although the journey was quite boring, Jian Wushuang had long been used to it. Time flew and 28 years had passed in a flash. 28 years was nothing for Jian Wushuang in his previous life but was considered a long time in his current life. In a vast void, dozens of guards were slowly moving forward while escorting 3 people seated on a huge beast. They were very young and dressed in luxurious clothes, obviously coming from rich families. The dozens of guards were powerful, with many of them being Earth ultimate gods, and the rest were above the ultimate god realm. Among these guards stood a cold and proud man in a black robe. The cold and arrogant black-robed man was skimming forward with his eyes closed. He was meditating at his own pace. The world evolves, life evolves. This is the essence of the principal world. It's the same with the sword world. Jian Wushuang mumbled in his heart, and very slowly he opened his eyes. The sword world coming from his body had made great changes the moment he opened his eyes. The change was unnoticeable on the external, but its internal and essential structure was no longer the same. I've understood the profound sword world. Jian Wushuang was beaming. He had achieved Merit Sword World a long time ago. He had been meditating on his way from northern Darkstar territory up to where he currently was and spent most of his decades in learning the laws and sword principle. His understanding of space-time and transmigration laws had greatly improved. Finally, he made a breakthrough in sword principle and achieved profound sword world. All the little signs of progress he made had contributed to a huge improvement to his overall strength. Brother Su Han. A handsome young man who was walking beside Jian Wushuang looked over. I see you're smiling so happily. Did something good happen? No, nothing. I just happened to understand something. Jian Wushuang smiled. The handsome young man smiled and said, That's something good, isn't it? I really admire your cultivation progress and strength improvement obtained amidst our travels. Jian Wushuang replied with a wide beam. Without warning. Boom, boom. A scary burst of aura emerged from the void in front before a large number of people started charging toward them at an astonishing speed. The escort team was in chaos. What's the matter? Is it a robbery? Would ordinary bandits have the guts to rob us? Besides, we're already on the edge of the Danyang continent. Chapter 2655. 7 major factions. The Danyang continent was located at the center of the Danyang Holy Domain and also the place where many top forces in the Danyang Holy Domain gathered. In other Danyang Holy Domain's stellar regions, ordinary ultimate gods were considered experts, and a considerably powerful Earth ultimate gods could easily become the territorial lord or a despot. However, matters were not the same on the Danyang continent, as an Earth ultimate god was nothing. Even a Heaven ultimate god was only considered ordinary within the Danyang continent, with only Grand ultimate gods hailed as experts. There were plenty of Grand ultimate gods in the Danyang continent, with top forces having a few of them. Jian Wushuang disguised himself and sat in a tavern while examining a piece of newly acquired information at hand. The intelligence report contained detailed information about Danyang continent's various forces, including those top main forces. The Danyang continent, or rather the entire Danyang Holy Domain, had a total of 5 top forces. First was the renowned Crimson Stone Fort. Although the Crimson Stone Fort was not what it used to be after Crimson Stone Saint's death, with its overall strength greatly weakened, they were still the official governor of Danyang Holy Domain. The body of a starved camel was still bigger than a horse. No one dared to underestimate Crimson Stone Fort's true powers. The other top forces were Nanwal Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan. Those 4 top forces were similar in terms of strength, with each having nearly 10 Grand Ultimate Gods and many Heaven Ultimate Gods under their command. They were deeply rooted with strong and powerful backgrounds. The Nanwal Palace was probably ranked first among those 4 forces. The Nanwal Palace Master was considered by many to be the current strongest expert in the Danyang Holy Domain and also the most promising candidate among numerous experts in the Danyang Holy Domain to reach the Undying Saint Realm. Therefore, the Nanwal Palace Master was awe-inspiring to many. Just like in the Narcissus territory when the various forces fought fiercely over the Huangji Golden Pill, Grand Ultimate Gods were even involved in the battle. Although the top forces dared to kill Nanwal Palace's Heaven Ultimate Gods, none would dare do anything to the Nanwui Young Palace Master, which only showed how much they were weary of Nanwal Palace. The top sects were truly extraordinary, as any one of them could easily come up with 10 grand ultimate gods. Jian Wushuang was secretly applauding. Jian Wushuang then carefully looked at the Crimson Stone Fort. Among those other top forces, he was most concerned about the Crimson Stone Fort. In the end, he had promised the Crimson Stone Saint to help his daughter Yin Suer. Moreover, the interspatial ring that Scorpion King gave him was still in his hands. Goodness, I knew that the Crimson Stone Fort was divided with many factions within, but I didn't expect there would be so many factions within this Crimson Stone Fort, a total of 7. Jian Wushuang glanced at the intelligence report in his hand and was marveled. There were indeed 7 different factions within the current Crimson Stone Fort. Those 7 powerful factions were led by their leaders fighting for their interests. Among the 7 factions, 3 were extremely powerful and most sought after for the resources they controlled. They were the 3 major factions. One of those 3 major factions was controlled by the current Crimson Stone Fort Master, Yin Suer. Yin Suer was indeed the current Fort Master, since she was extremely powerful on top of being Crimson Stone Saint's biological daughter. Yin Suer showed great talent when the Crimson Stone Saint was still alive and became a grand ultimate god at a young age with a great chance of making a breakthrough to the Undying Saint realm. It was a pity that Crimson Stone Saint died. All kinds of internal and external issues struck at the same time after she took over the management as the new Fort Master. Facing those tremendous pressures only further solidified her breakthrough bottleneck, as she had stopped advancing for a while with her cultivation journey stagnant in place. Although she later still made a breakthrough and reached the peak Grand Ultimate God with only 1 step away from the Undying Saint realm, she was already stagnant for a long time. The possibility of her making a breakthrough and become an Undying Saint at that moment was extremely low. Many people thought she would never be able to make a future breakthrough. Most of them thought the probability of Nanwu Palace Master making a breakthrough to the Undying Saint realm was much higher than her. Although she did not make a breakthrough to the Undying Saint realm, the power and deterrence effect of a peak Grand Ultimate God was nevertheless amazing. Moreover, she was also the legitimate Fort Master, hence many experts chose to support her, so the factions she managed were the leader of the top 3 major factions. In addition to her being the peak Grand Ultimate God, she also managed 6 Grand Ultimate Gods of varying strength levels. Even though Yin Suer had lost one of her assistants when the Scorpion King died, her control over the faction was still extremely powerful. In addition, Crimson Stone Fort's Sacred Palace was dedicated to cultivating talented and powerful people completely under the control of Yin Suer. The Sacred Palace Master was the right-hand man of Yin Suer, who possessed greater strength than Scorpion King. She has 6 Grand Ultimate Gods in her faction, including Yin Suer. It's noteworthy that she's a peak Grand Ultimate God and in control of really amazing matters such as the Sacred Palace, murmured Jian Wushuang before checking out the other 2 big factions. As for the other 2 big factions, one of them was controlled by Crimson Stone Fort Great Elder Yunshan, while the other by the Crimson Stone Army Commander, the Blood Thunder King. Yunshan was also a peak Grand Ultimate God who went with the Crimson Stone Saint and set up the Crimson Stone Fort. Both of them were brothers. During Crimson Stone Fort's peak, Crimson Stone Saint sat awe-inspiring in control of the Crimson Stone Fort, while the Great Elder Yunshan was the one handling day-to-day operation and gathered a large number of subordinates over time. After the Crimson Stone Saint's death, the order for Yin Suer to inherit the Fort Master position was given. Although Yunshan was receptive to the arrangement on the surface, he secretly tried and used many methods to stop it. The appearance of Crimson Stone Fort's many factions started at that time with Yunshan as their leader. Yunshan was a peak Grand Ultimate God and he had 6 Grand Ultimate Gods under him. In addition, he controlled most of the cultivation resources in the Crimson Stone Fort, such that even Yin Suer had to get Yunshan's consent and even beg him when she needed some cultivation resources. To put it bluntly, Yunshan is an old sly fox who exercises control with artifice, said Jian Wushuang secretly. He then looked at the last of the top 3 factions, which were led by the Blood Thunder King. The Blood Thunder King was not powerful when compared to Yin Suer and Yunshan at just a high-level Grand Ultimate God, but he managed the strongest faction among the 3 major factions. Chapter 2656. Before the Sacred Palace Crimson Stone Army. They were the ones who opened up and expanded the territory across the 9 realms of Golden Crow for Crimson Stone Saint. There were 1,000 people in the army when Crimson Stone Fort was at its peak, with all of those powerful people being the Heaven Ultimate God realm. Although Crimson Stone Fort had fallen, the most powerful lineup and combat power of the Crimson Stone Fort still gathered under the Crimson Stone Army, with the lowest soldier grade in the Crimson Stone Army at peak Earth Ultimate God. They had a large number of Heaven Ultimate Gods on top of 10 Grand Ultimate Gods in the Crimson Stone Army. All those were completely under the Blood Thunder King's control, which explained the reason Blood Thunder King dared to challenge both Yin Suer and Yun Shan. In addition to those 3 major factions, the other 4 smaller factions were not weak either, with most of them having 2 or 3 Grand Ultimate Gods controlling their resources and were influential. Among the 7 major factions, there are 3 large factions and 4 smaller factions who compete against each other for their interests and occasionally cause wars and incessant internal friction. Such is the situation in the current Crimson Stone Fort. Jian Wushuang secretly concluded admiringly. The Crimson Stone Fort was indeed in a very chaotic situation. However, that did not undermine the amazing power possessed by the Crimson Stone Fort. There were more than 20 Grand Ultimate Gods altogether in the 3 big factions, and after adding up the ones from the 4 smaller factions, Crimson Stone Fort had 35 Grand Ultimate Gods in total, including both Yin Suer and Yun Shan, the 2 peak Grand Ultimate Gods. Their combat power was much stronger than that of Nanwu Palace. The amount of Grand Ultimate Gods added up from the 4 top powers, Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan, were only a few more than that of Crimson Stone Fort. However, the strength within Crimson Stone Fort was divided and scattered, with the factions not united, which led to the current precarious status of Crimson Stone Fort. It was conceivable that those top forces had absolutely no fear of Crimson Stone Fort, since the Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect even dared to slay the Scorpion King and rob Crimson Stone Fort of their resources. If Yin Suer wants to completely change the situation in Danyang Holy Domain and bring it back to life, she has to find a way to settle the internal friction and integrates all the other 6 factions in Crimson Stone Fort before concentrating all their strengths to control the 4 top forces, Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan. She had to eliminate them one by one to completely wipe out her worries. However, it may not be easy to accomplish all this unless she can make a breakthrough to the Undying Saint realm, said Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang knew that Yin Suer would have resolved it long ago if Crimson Stone Fort's internal conflict was so easy to resolve. She would not have helplessly allowed it to drag on, and neither would the Crimson Stone Saint paid a great price to get him to assist Yin Suer. No matter what, I have to find a way to meet Yin Suer in person, thought Jian Wushuang carefully. However, Yin Suer was the Crimson Stone Fort Master and a super expert at peak Grand Ultimate God realm. It would not be easy to visit her. Jian Wushuang was merely an Earth Ultimate God to which no one would pay attention had he openly gone to the Crimson Stone Fort and sought a meeting. They might kick him out, or even worse, kill him. If he declared his identity and made himself known as Jian Yi, he could not guarantee the first person to meet him was Yin Suer. It might be Yun Shan or the Blood Thunder King who found him first among the many factions in Crimson Stone Fort. It's unrealistic for me to meet Yin Suer directly. However, I can find a way to first meet the expert next to her, such as the Sacred Palace Master, and get him to help me send a message to Yin Suer. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently and made a decision. The Sacred Palace was a special place Crimson Stone Fort used to train talented people. It was once a genius concentration camp within the Danyang Holy Domain, where countless geniuses and young cultivators in the Danyang Holy Domain desired to gain admittance. However, the strength of the Crimson Stone Fort had dwindled since the fall of the Crimson Stone Saint. Therefore, the Sacred Palace was no longer as attractive as it used to be for those geniuses and cultivators. There were also similar places within the top forces like Nanwu Palace and Divine Demon Sect who were specialized in cultivating talented people as good as the Sacred Palace. Even so, the Sacred Palace still attracted quite a fair bit of younger cultivators. A huge and towering mountain stood tall in the center of Danyang Holy Domain. The 100,000-foot tall mountain that reached into the clouds was surrounded by a powerful restrictive shield that could withstand the powerful strength of an undying saint. The sacred palace was located where the giant mountain was. Many sacred palace disciples lived at the top of that huge mountain all year round with countless attics and palaces with ample training resources. At the top of the mountain was a huge green stairway that spanned from the mountain top to the foot of the mountain. This stairway was called the Sacred Heaven Road. The sacred palace was where geniuses gathered, and not anyone was able to enter the sacred palace for cultivation, hence there were only two ways to join the sacred palace. The first method was to get a recommendation from one of those top experts in the Crimson Stone Fort and pass the Sacred Palace's test before becoming a disciple of Sacred Palace. The second method was to climb the Sacred Heaven Road. Any cultivators below the Grand Ultimate God realm, even a peak Heaven Ultimate God, would try climbing the Sacred Heaven Road. The cultivator had to start from the first step and walked up step by step. He would be accepted into the Sacred Palace so long the cultivator was able to reach the top of Sacred Heaven Road within 10 years. If a cultivator failed to reach the top within 10 years, they would have to walk down and start from the first step again. The second method to go through the Sacred Heaven Road was the most difficult between the two methods. However, people who entered the Sacred Palace using this method were usually more talented and powerful. Many younger cultivators were having great difficulty threading the Sacred Heaven Road. Most of those cultivators were talented and powerful, with the majority having reached the Earth Ultimate God realm with only very few Ultimate Gods. As for the Heaven Ultimate Gods, there were none. Cultivators below Grand Ultimate Gods were able to enter the Sacred Palace. However, the Sacred Palace was of very little benefit to Heaven Ultimate Gods because many cultivation resources in the Sacred Palace had very weak effects on Heaven Ultimate Gods. Therefore, cultivators who had reached the Heaven Ultimate God realm would normally choose not to join the Sacred Palace or any other cultivation places. Is that the Sacred Palace? Jian Wushuang could see the countless attics and palaces at the mountain top from where he was standing at the huge mountain foot. He did not try to hide his divine power breath, nor did he try to disguise it with the black stone, and was clearly showing the aura of a high-level Earth Ultimate God. Chapter 2657. Sacred Heaven Road. Jian Wushuang walked toward the Sacred Heaven Road without hesitation. He soon set foot on the first step of the Sacred Heaven Road. Jian Wushuang immediately sensed a decent oppressive force on him as soon as he arrived at the first step. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. Is this all? No, it shouldn't be that simple. Jian Wushuang did not stop and continued walking up step by step. The oppressive force on him was getting stronger as he gradually progressed up those steps. However, the oppressive force did not affect Jian Wushuang at all, nor did it slow down his pace. The Sacred Heaven Road had 1,000 steps in total. Jian Wushuang soon arrived on the 99th step, and when he stepped on the 100th step, the world surrounding Jian Wushuang began to change as he soon arrived in a vast, limitless dark void with a tall figure standing before him while solemnly staring at him. You have to stay with me for 10 breaths before you can move on. A cold voice came from the tall figure. Consciousness space? Jian Wushuang was surprised as a smile spread on his face. Jian Wushuang was on the 100th step only for a brief moment before he continued to step toward the 101st step. The consciousness space test was based on one's cultivation realm, hence the test was set at a similar level for Jian Wushuang was only a high-level Earth Ultimate God and allowed him to pass without much difficulty. He was moving all the way up at a very fast pace. In just a few moments, he had already arrived on the 700th step without even slowing down. There were still many young cultivators who were walking upward with difficulty on the Sacred Heaven Road. The region between 700th and 900th steps had dozens of young cultivators, with most of them stuck on their own steps as the difficulty drastically increased upon every step upward. On the 750th step, a dark-skinned young man wrapped in animal skins was standing there trembling under the huge oppressive force on his body, but gritted his teeth and endured it. The 750th step is already my limit. I can only try to adapt slowly and find a way to set foot on the 751st step. The young man wrapped in animal skins grunted in a low voice. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside him. The young man wrapped in animal skins immediately turned his head to look. I haven't seen this person before. When did he arrive behind me? The young man wrapped in animal skins was puzzled but could see that man did not even stop as he continued stepping onto the 751st step before continuing to step onto the 752nd step. The young man wrapped in animal skins was taken aback. What? The oppressive force is already very terrifying at the 750th steps. His speed would have been forced to slow down no matter how good a cultivator is, but he was still advancing fast. It seems as though he's unaffected by the oppressive force at all. Many other young cultivators on the Sacred Heaven Road had also noticed the existence of the cold and proud man in the black robe other than him. He was none other than Jian Wushuang. Look at that person. He's so fast. He has already reached the 790th steps, but is still advancing fast? The 800th step. Everyone held their breath as they watched him. Every 100th step on the Sacred Heaven Road had a test in the consciousness space. The test was very difficult, with many geniuses unable to pass the 800th step test, with most needing to be stuck on it for a long time even if they were able to pass. Jian Wushuang merely stopped briefly before continuing to step forward onto the 801st step, to everyone's surprise after reaching the 800th step. How's this possible? This is impossible. Many cultivators on the Sacred Heaven Road were in disbelief. The 800th step consciousness space test did not even stop that person's speed? What's going on? It basically meant that he only needed less than 10 breaths to survive in the consciousness space test, and probably had instantaneously defeated his opponent. They could sense that person's divine power breath at the high-level Earth Ultimate God. It would not come as no surprise for a high-level Earth Ultimate God to go up against an opponent at the peak Earth Ultimate God on the 800th step. However, that man had instantly defeated his opponent. In other words, his true combat strength was definitely higher and perhaps might have reached the peak Earth Ultimate God realm despite being only a high-level Earth Ultimate God. He must be quite strong even among peak Earth Ultimate Gods. He was capable of challenging higher realm cultivators. The man turned out to be an expert in challenging cultivators stronger than himself. The man did not slow down at all after passing the 800th step. The increasing oppressive pressure force seemed to not affect him at all as he continued to climb at an extremely fast pace. He soon reached the 850th, 880th, and 900th step. At the 900th step, he was once again caught in the consciousness space test that was even more difficult than the previous. The result was the same nonetheless. The man only paused for a brief moment before continuing onto the 901st step. Many young cultivators on the Sacred Heaven Road were completely stunned. They could not believe what they saw. Jian Wushuang continued to move upward with ease under their incomprehensible gazes, and in just a jiffy stepped on the last step, the 1000th step. Even on the very last step, he was not bothered by the hindrances and had easily crossed over, finally reaching the top end of Sacred Heaven Road. He got to the top? Did he just effortlessly climb to the top of Sacred Heaven Road? I feel like he's just sauntering and unaffected by the tests. Who's this person? Many young cultivators still struggling on the steps looked up at Jian Wushuang, who had already reached the mountain top, with widened eyes. At the mountain top, Jian Wushuang looked at the densely arranged attics and palaces before him with a weird smile on his face. I've been rather high profile by so effortlessly climbing up the mountain. It's impossible to not catch the attention of Sacred Heaven Palace's experts, but am unsure if I've caught the palace masters? Jian Wushuang secretly thought. Chapter 2658. Sacred Palace Keeper at the top of a grandiose and lavish black penthouse in Sacred Palace. A slender, tall, and blond middle-aged man sat next to a desk, reading a jade slip casually. A silver-haired old man in a white robe entered hastily. Palace Keeper, we just received news that someone is coming our way through Sacred Heaven Road, said the old man. Oh, the Sacred Palace is accepting a new genius disciple. That's great. The blond middle-aged man answered casually, but his eyes were still on the jade slip. The thing is, the time he spent reaching the summit from Sacred Heaven Road was too short, said the white-robed old man anxiously. Too short? How short? The blond middle-aged man finally put down the jade slip and looked downward. The white-robed old man took a deep breath and slowly showed one finger. A year. The blond man nodded slightly. If he can reach the peak in a year, that's pretty good. Not 1 year. The old man shook his head. A month then. The blond man's face began to turn serious. Sacred Palace has countless geniuses, but those who can reach the summit in a month could be counted with one hand. Geniuses like this are worth our total support and nurture. No, sir, not a month either, but, before the old man finished, don't tell me he only spent a day? The blond middle-aged man stood up suddenly. His eyes were shining. No, not a day, but 1 hour. That man spent less than an hour on the Sacred Heaven Road to reach the peak. The white-robed old man finally finished his sentence. How's that possible? Even the blond middle-aged man, a top expert among the high-level grand ultimate gods and also the respectable Sacred Palace keeper, was shocked when he heard such news. Reaching the summit through Sacred Heaven Road within an hour? One had to understand that the Crimson Stone Saint had sacrificed a lot of effort when he was still alive to build the Sacred Heaven Road as a means to pick disciples for Sacred Palace. There were incredibly difficult challenges along Sacred Heaven Road such that those who could get through within a year were considered very skillful geniuses. If a month, a top genius. One who spent 1 day was simply a super freak. There was not anyone who could reach the summit through Sacred Heaven Road in a mere day since the Sacred Palace's establishment a long time ago. Spending less than 1 hour, that was unimaginable. Where's he now? The blond middle-aged man seemed to be very excited. He has reached the summit and is now at Sacred Palace's plaza, said the white-haired old man wearing white robes. Let's go, bring me to him, said the blond man immediately. Crazy. A super freak who only spent less than 1 hour to reach the summit. Such a super freak was of course worth a personal greeting by the Sacred Palace keeper. Jian Wushuang stood there with his arms folded on the gigantic plaza at the Sacred Palace. Numerous Sacred Palace disciples were surrounding him along with some Sacred Palace experts. All of them were staring at Jian Wushuang while quietly discussing among themselves. It's him. I was beside the Sacred Heaven Road just now and saw him stepping on the first step of Sacred Heaven Road to head upwards. He had reached the top of Sacred Heaven Road and came into the Sacred Palace in less than an hour. Not even an hour? You've got to be joking. How come he can move so quickly? Sacred Heaven Road is very difficult, especially the Consciousness Space Challenge. He probably used incredible force to defeat them instead of finding a way to pass through his 10 opponents. However, according to my knowledge of the last Consciousness Space 1000-step challenge, his opponents were all super strong peak Earth ultimate gods. He managed to defeat them? Although he's only a high-level Earth ultimate god, his battle strength is unheard of. Monster. A monster has visited the Sacred Palace. The disciples had a fascinated look on their faces. It was normal as Jian Wushuang had displayed extremely heaven-defying abilities. However, they did not realize the abilities Jian Wushuang showed along Sacred Heaven Road was not even the tip of the iceberg. It was indeed true he was just a high-level Earth ultimate god, but his true battle strength was extremely strong even among high-level heaven ultimate gods. The Sacred Palace disciples would perhaps be frightened to death if he unleashed his full battle strength. Jian Wushuang of course did not quite like to show off and would not have been acting so high profile were it not because he wanted to attract the Sacred Palace keeper's attention. He would have normally used the black stone to conceal his aura to disguise as having a primary level heaven ultimate god's divine power aura so that the public would be more acceptable in the event he displayed powers slightly stronger than his supposed realm's battle strength. Bush. 2 figures gilded speedily over and landed on the plaza in the blink of an eye before Jian Wushuang. Finally here? Jian Wushuang focused his eyesight and looked over at the blond middle-aged man between the two. He could sense the pressure brought to him by the blond middle-aged man. A pressure heaven ultimate god could not possibly bring forth. Only experts at the grand ultimate god level could bring him such heavy pressure. It was clear who he was. Is he the Sacred Palace keeper? Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The blond man was staring at him too as he looked at him. A powerful soul power shrouded Jian Wushuang's entire body, and he naturally also noticed Jian Wushuang's facial disguise. He changed his face? The blond middle-aged man could see through it all, but he did not show it on his face. Kid, welcome to the sacred palace. Si Zhen, the sacred palace keeper. My pleasure to meet you, palace keeper Si Zhen. Jian Wushuang bowed slightly but did not reveal his name. Follow me. The blond middle-aged man looked deeply at Jian Wushuang and did not ask any questions in front of the sacred palace disciples. He instead brought Jian Wushuang into the grand penthouse. At the top of the penthouse, the blond middle-aged man sent away the white-robed white-haired man before setting up a restrictive shield around them before he finally asked, Kid, tell me who exactly are you? Chapter 2659. Su'er Jian Wushuang smiled plainly and slowly bowed upon seeing the blond middle-aged palace keeper Si Zhen sitting down. A pleasure to meet you, palace keeper Si Zhen. Palace keeper Si Zhen suddenly stood up in surprise. Jianni? You're the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord? Jian Wushuang did not answer, but his facial muscles began to twitch before reverting to his true form after a short moment. Si Zhen had seen Jian Wushuang's portrait before as one of Crimson Stone Fort's highest authorities and naturally recognized his face right away. It's really you? Palace keeper Si Zhen was rather shocked but soon shook his head. It can't be. The Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord should be a peak Earth ultimate god according to our intelligence, but your cultivation level. The cultivation level those people previously sensed was due to my divine power aura being masked with a special method. My true level is only at the high-level Earth ultimate god. Jian Wushuang smiled. However, I've heard you concurrently withstood 3 heaven ultimate gods by yourself and wasn't even at a disadvantage. In other words, you already have the battle strength no less than that of a heaven ultimate god as a high-level Earth ultimate god? Si Zhen slightly squinted. That's indeed true, admitted Jian Wushuang directly. However, the fact remains that he was merely a primary-level Earth ultimate god when he withstood 3 primary-level heaven ultimate gods by himself and had only made a breakthrough to high-level Earth ultimate god after obtaining some divine elixir pills later, which was what Palace Keeper Si Zhen was witnessing. Jian Wushuang would not take initiative to mention that, of course. No wonder you have only spent less than an hour in the Sacred Heaven Road to reach the summit. The Sacred Heaven Road challenges are set in accordance with one's cultivation level. The challenges you experienced should be set at that level as well since you're only a high-level Earth ultimate god. Your opponents in the 1000-step consciousness space were only peak Earth ultimate gods with stronger abilities, so there's no way they could compete against you. Si Zhen gazed solemnly at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled plainly. Palace Keeper Si Zhen, you overly flattered me. You know my current situation well with both the Life and Death Tower, Divine Demon Sect, and many others enthusiastically looking for me to obtain the interspatial ring on me. I've been concealing my true identity all these years while traveling to Danyang continent from Northern Darkstar territory just because I want to pass the interspatial ring to the Crimson Stone Fort Master. However, perhaps it's not so easy for someone of my status to meet the Fort Master, hence I can only come to Sacred Palace and make a fuzz to lure you into personally meeting me. I can understand your intentions and shall transmit a message to the Fort Master. Palace Keeper Si Zhen nodded slightly and immediately took out a message token. An answer was received about a minute later. The Fort Master is currently discussing something with Grand Elder Yun Shan and said shall come to meet you immediately right after the discussion, said Palace Keeper Si Zhen. I shall wait here for a little while in that case. Jian Wushuang smiled patiently. The wait took almost half a day and finally, ring. A figure slowly appeared before Jian Wushuang after a light beam flashed. It was an extremely beautiful, slender and tall woman with a rosy cheek clad in an ice blue long dress. She even possessed a majestic air, perhaps due to her high status. Although she did not purposely let out a strong divine power aura, one would not dare think of committing any blasphemy acts toward her as she stood there. Is she Crimson Stone Saint's daughter, Su'er? Jian Wushuang calmly looked at the beautiful lady. You are Jianni? Su'er also looked toward Jian Wushuang. A pleasure to meet you. Jian Wushuang modestly bowed as a sense of respect toward an expert. Is the interspatial ring still with you right now? Yin Suer's voice was incredibly cold. Jian Wushuang turned his hand to show the interspatial ring that Scorpion King had tossed at him before dying. There was not even a missing blood gems, as he had never touched it at all ever since he carefully guarded the interspatial ring. He simply passed the interspatial ring into Yin Suer's hand in its complete and original form. Yin Suer quickly scanned through the interspatial ring when she took it and nodded. 3,700,000,000 pounds of blood gems is truly a great wealth. It's unfortunately I've lost one of my right-hand men, Scorpion King, due to these blood gems. It's only a matter of time before I find Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect to seek vengeance after cleaning up those factions in the Crimson Stone Fort. Jian Wushuang's expression remained the same upon hearing that, despite agreeing with her in his mind. Life and Death Tower and Divine Demon Sect had the guts to make their move on Scorpion King under so many people's watchful eyes because they were not afraid of Yin Suer seeking revenge. Yin Suer indeed currently did not possess the capabilities to get back at them by merely relying on the powers she could maneuver, which was not comparable with either Divine Demon Sect or Life and Death Tower at that point. However, it was not something that could be easily achieved unless she could unite all the power within Crimson Stone Fort. Yin Suer gazed at Jian Wushuang again. Scorpion King communicated with me earlier and mentioned you before. He said you possess a token from my father. Indeed. Jian Wushuang took out the token that Crimson Stone Saint gave him. Yin Suer, who was extremely familiar with Crimson Stone Saint and Palace Keeper Si Zhen, immediately recognized it as soon as the token was shown. It's real. Yin Suer and Si Zhen looked at each other with a strange light shining in their eyes. Yin Suer continued, Scorpion King told me before that you aren't a personal disciple of my father, so this token, the token is indeed given to me by Crimson Stone Saint. You can personally go to Saint's tomb and ask, as it's because of a deal I made with him, said Jian Wushuang. What kind of a deal? Yin Suer asked. It's a very simple deal. I promise him to help you resolve your current crisis once I possess sufficient abilities before helping you to make a breakthrough into the Undying Saint realm, if possible in return for the Feng Tian scroll, said Jian Wushuang. Feng Tian scroll? My father had given his Feng Tian scroll to you? Yin Suer was shocked. She knew the Feng Tian scroll's origin. It was an extremely rare treasure. After Crimson Stone Saint died, many experts knew that he had left behind a residential tomb with the Feng Tian scroll located there. Therefore, those experts were attracted by it and wanted to enter his tomb and explore. Unfortunately, Crimson Stone Saint had set up multiple layers of restrictive shields to the extent that one would not be able to enter by force unless they had the capabilities of an Undying Saint. Feng Tian scroll had thus been left inside his tomb. Chapter 2660. Sacred Palace Disciple. Her father gave such a precious treasure to Jian Yi, who was standing before her? Moreover, Jian Yi was not his personal disciple and they merely made a deal? Is father so trusting towards him and thinking he can really help me? Yin Suer thought to herself before saying, Father must have his reasons for willing making a deal with you using the Feng Tian scroll and have you help me, but your current abilities are still rather weak. Jian Wushuang was at a loss for words. It was undeniable that his current abilities would not be looked upon highly by Yin Suer or any grand ultimate gods. How about this? Why don't you stay here in the Sacred Palace since you've taken the Sacred Heaven Road and reached the summit? There are a lot of cultivation resources here for you to increase your abilities. I'll ask Palace Keeper Si Zhen to grant you the convenience of obtaining whatever you need and ask for, said Yin Suer. There actually are items that I need, said Jian Wushuang. Tell me. Yin Suer was rather calm. I need divine elixir pills, said Jian Wushuang directly. How many? Yin Suer asked. As many as possible. A few thousand would be best, said Jian Wushuang. A few thousand? Yin Suer was shocked. Jian Yi, a few thousand divine elixir pills? You really have quite an appetite. Palace Keeper Si Zhen also opened his eyes widely and stared at Jian Wushuang. Oh, is it difficult? Jian Wushuang asked. Not that it's difficult but simply impossible, said Si Zhen. It's indeed impossible. Yin Suer nodded as well. Divine elixir pills aren't as common as primordial stones. Although Crimson Stone Fort is quite wealthy and that we do keep quite a bit of divine elixir pills, most of them have their specific function with not many that we can actually use. Furthermore, the most important point was that Yun Shan guarded most of those pills which could be used. Do you know him? Yes. The leader of another faction in Crimson Stone Fort, the Grand Elder of Crimson Stone Fort, said Jian Wushuang. Exactly. Even though I'm the Crimson Stone Fort Master, there are quite many resources that I need to go through him if I want to take them. The divine elixir pills are an example. I might not be able to ask for too many even if I personally requested the pills. I can't guarantee how many I can obtain, but I'll do my best to request for you, said Yin Suer. I shall thank you in advance, said Jian Wushuang gratefully. He knew it would be difficult for Yin Suer's, but it was already very kind of her to agree with helping him as much as she could. It was also because Crimson Stone Saint had personally sent him. Otherwise, he would never receive such special treatment from Yin Suer. Was it someone else? Jian Yi, this is your Sacred Palace disciple's token. Please stay in the Sacred Palace for the coming days. I shall inform everyone that all the resources in Sacred Palace are unconditionally open for your use. Palace Keeper Sijin passed Jian Wushuang a token. Jian Wushuang accepted it and nodded slightly before leaving. Yin Suer and Palace Keeper Sijin remained in the penthouse. Fort Master, do you really think Jian Yi can help you change our current situation? Sijin inquired. I don't know. Yin Suer shook her head. But my father always had a way to spot the right people. He must have seen immense possibilities in Jian Yi since he recognized that Jian Yi would be of great help for me and even made a deal with him using the Feng Tian scroll. I'll naturally do my very best to help him grow since father firmly believes in him, offering me great help. Palace Keep Sijin solemnly said, That's indeed quite true. The old master was an undying saint and had seen things that our kind won't possibly believe after all. Besides, Jian Yi is indeed extraordinary from the abilities he displayed. Jian Yi relied on his own strength to fight against 3 heaven ultimate gods a few decades ago when Scorpion King had fallen. However, his cultivation level was only at high-level Earth ultimate god, yet could easily pass through the sacred heaven road to reach the summit within an hour. These 2 instances are amazing enough. I have seen many geniuses as the sacred palace keeper, such as some of the demons in Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to present a genius who is comparable to him even for Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, who boast of accepting only the best. No. Yin Suer shook her head. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is full of geniuses and those you normally see aren't necessarily their best. I've at least heard of one person who's regarded as the most extraordinary genius in Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's history with talents that exceed our imagination. That person's talent is probably even higher than Jian Yi. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has such genius? Palace Keeper Sijin was shocked. I've only heard of this person but never the pleasure to meet her. She's a woman who's quite young, said Yin Suer before diverted back to their topic. Anyways, this Jian Yi is worth our complete efforts to nurture. He can at least become of great help if he could grow stronger, even if he can't become someone who can single-handedly change our situation in Crimson Stone Fort as my father expected. As long as he becomes a grand ultimate god in the future, the help he can provide will be even greater than Scorpion King's. Scorpion King. As Palace Keeper Sijin fell silent as Scorpion King's name was mentioned. Scorpion King was absolutely loyal to Crimson Stone Saint just like him and gave his all to assist Yin Suer. The 2 of them might as well be considered Yin Suer's left and right hands. Scorpion King and he were like brothers who had been through so much. However, the Scorpion King fell. Most importantly, they knew how he fell and who had killed him, but had no ability to avenge him at that moment. It was truly their biggest regret. It's only a matter of time before we avenge the Scorpion King, but our current urgency is to straighten out Yun Shan and the Blood Thunder King. Our resources were tight before, but having this batch of blood gems has bought us some time and slightly reduced the pressures I've been facing. Yin Suer's expression was cold, but her eyes were shining with a strange light of hope. As for the divine elixir pills that Jian Yi needs, He probably uses them to increase his cultivation level. I'll do my very best to help him get them while I'll let you take care of the other matters. Try to provide as much as you can if he has other needs and report to me anytime if there are any movements or increases in his abilities, reminded Insuer. Aye. Sijin nodded respectfully. Insuer did not stay any longer and left after giving a few more instructions. Chapter 2661. Space-Time Beast. The Sacred Palace was a place where Crimson Stone Fort nurtured geniuses, and it was where geniuses were plenty. After becoming one of the many disciples there, Jian Wushuang took a stroll in the vicinity. The Sacred Palace was very large and contained quite a lot of specific places for cultivation. Jian Wushuang was checking out the cultivation spaces that were more or less helpful to cultivate the understanding of certain laws or principles one by one. Even though the cultivation spaces were really quite helpful to regular genius disciples at Earth Ultimate God level, they were of little use for Jian Wushuang, whose battle strength was sufficient to withstand high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods. He passed by many cultivation spaces along the way, but nothing seemed satisfactory enough for him to join and study. Especially the Sword Principal Palace that he just walked by. Although the Sword Principal Palace claimed to be one that specialized in sword principles with various kinds of sword techniques to be studied inside, there isn't much to study with my current achievement. I could perhaps study those sword skills before my sword principle reaches the sword world's profound achievement, but now, I can see through their fundamentals. Jian Wushuang sighed secretly. There were various cultivation spaces along the way with only a handful being of little help to him. He arrived at a huge green palace at that moment. The incredibly wide green palace with a special space-time energy surrounding it had caught Jian Wushuang's attention. At the palace door, a purple-clad old man stood there like an old Zen monk with his eyes closed as someone walked out of the palace right at that moment. Senior brother. Jian Wushuang went up to him. A down-to-earth-looking big man raised his head and asked, "Yes? Can I help you?" "Well, I'm unfamiliar with a lot of matters here as I've just arrived at the Sacred Palace. I would like to ask Senior Brother, what is inside this palace?" Jian Wushuang asked. The down-to-earth man answered, "This palace is the Space-Time Palace. It's a place disciples use to study space-time law with quite an amazing space-time beast in the palace. You're welcome to go in and try if you're studying space-time law, but you'll need to have enough sacred points." "Is that so?" Jian Wushuang was slightly moved. Space-Time Palace was used for studying space-time law, and it just so happened that it was what he studied. "Thank you, Senior Brother." Jian Wushuang thanked him and immediately walked towards the Space-Time Palace's entrance. Once he arrived at the door, the meditating monk-like old man in purple clothes opened his eyes and gazed at him. Spending a month in the Space-Time Palace requires 10 sacred points. Sacred points? Jian Wushuang was weirded out. He knew that sacred points were widely circulated contribution credits among the Sacred Palace disciples gained through carrying out missions, exchanging treasures, or even through battle gambles with fellow disciples. "I just arrived at Sacred Palace and have no sacred points, but Palace Keeper Sijin had instructed that any resources in the Sacred Palace are unconditionally open for me to use. Entering the Space-Time Palace should be within my rights," said Jian Wushuang. "All resources are opened unconditionally for you? His Excellency the Palace Keeper said that to you personally?" The purple-clad old man looked at him in surprise. "Indeed, you can always check in with Palace Keeper Sijin if you don't believe me." Jian Wushuang smiled. The old man did not completely believe him and thereafter inquired through his message token before very soon received a reply. "His Excellency really gave such an order?" The old man looked in disbelief before taking a good look at Jian Wushuang. He then said, "Please enter." "Thank you very much," said Jian Wushuang, who went straight into the Space-Time Palace. The down-to-earth man that Jian Wushuang just talked to went up after he entered. "Elder Purple, what's going on? How come you let that man just now in without giving you any sacred points?" he asked in surprise. Normally, the Sacred Palace disciples had to pay sacred points before they could enter into the Space-Time Palace. "Well," the old man mumbled for a short while before he summarized Palace Sijin's instructions. "Goodness, Who is he to have all the resources in the sacred palace open to him? How come he gets such special treatments? The down-to-earth man felt more envious than stunned. There was a gigantic plaza inside the space-time palace with a dozen sacred palace disciples scattered around and sitting in lotus posture. In the foremost part of the plaza was a huge black statue. That's big! Jian Wushuang raised his head to stare at the black statue. The incredibly big black statue was 3,000 meters tall. The noseless black beast had a triangular head, huge eyes, and a tiny mouth. It had 2 horns on its forehead and looked incredibly fierce. Its body was covered in cold black scales. Every one of those black scales was the size of an adult human, which spread across every corner of the figure like black fire. It looked very vivid, as though it was alive. Jian Wushuang felt uncontrollably moved upon his very first glance at the black beast, as he could sense strong space-time energy from the beast. The space-time energy was covering the entire beast's body and even on each scale. Jian Wushuang even felt that every scale on the black beast's body contained space-time law. His soul power did a thorough search and discovered there were exactly 1,000 scale pieces on the beast. Space-time beast? Is this what the senior brother just now referred to as the space-time beast? Jian Wushuang mumbled. He immediately sat down in a lotus style on the plaza and closed his eyes before beginning his studies. It took a short moment before Jian Wushuang sensed something. Every scale on the black beast represented a piece of space-time law. 1,000 scale pieces mean 1,000 pieces of space-time law. The space-time law's first stage could form 1,000 apparitions. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself quietly and soon got his answer. Every space-time law on the 1,000 scales indeed represents 1,000 apparitions. Once I've understood the space-time law, on all of the scales I can conjure 1,000 apparitions. It then means I've completed the first stage of space-time laws, which is also the limit. The space-time law has to evolve once again after that towards the second stage. Chapter 2662, Second Stage, Space-Time Strangulation. Jian Wushuang had fully immersed himself in understanding the space-time beast. Forming apparitions was merely the first stage and step of space-time law. There was the second stage, third stage, and so on after that. Jian Wushuang had been using Feng Tian Scroll to increase his understanding of laws within the 40 years' journey from northern Darkstar territory to Danyang continent. His understanding of space-time law and transmigration law had tremendously increased at that point. He could concurrently already form 1,000 apparitions when it came to space-time law. In other words, he had achieved the limit of space-time law's first stage. However, he had not taken his step into the second stage. Jian Wushuang had found a trace of opportunity from the space-time beast to cross into the second stage at that moment. Those scales, Jian Wushuang's soul power energy was scrutinized on every single scale. Those scales had become one entity within his senses. There were 1,000 scales, yet it felt like there was only one scale. Those scales which had the first stage of space-time law were evolving to its extreme. However, the space-time law within the scales continued to evolve and gradually evolved into a gigantic space-time black hole following Jian Wushuang's continued studies. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, the huge space-time beast in front of him had vanished and only to be replaced with a terrifying space-time black hole. Infinite strangulation energy swept into all directions within the space-time black hole. Strangulation, space-time strangulation. Jian Wushuang was shaken in the heart. Space-time law's first stage was the formation of apparition, while its second stage was space-time strangulation. One had to learn to control the power of space-time strangulation at that stage. Jian Wushuang had been exploring all those years but had not been able to find anything. However, he could see the complete evolution form of the space-time law through the space-time beast. Is that so? That is how space-time law's first stage evolves to the second stage? The space-time law that Jian Wushuang had control began to evolve according to the evolution process on the space-time beast. Time passed day after day, and very soon Jian Wushuang had stayed in the space-time palace for a good half-month. He finally opened his eyes and smiled joyfully while still sitting in lotus style at the plaza. Second stage, successful. He felt very happy inside. Previously, he did not look forward much to the cultivation resources the sacred palace had to offer. Those resources were not of much use to cultivators at the Heaven Ultimate God realm and above. However, who would have thought he was lucky enough to find a space-time beast statue there? The space-time beast contained the space-time law's evolution, and it just so happened to be very helpful for him. After carefully studying it had immensely helped his understanding of space-time law. Every breakthrough to a new stage in space-time law is a huge leap forward which causes fundamental changes in the control of space-time law. There are too many people here, so let me go find a quiet place to try it out. Jian Wushuang stood up right away and exited the space-time palace. The purple-clad old man still had his eyes closed and was standing like a meditating old monk outside the space-time palace. His eyelids twitched as he realized Jian Wushuang had just walked out and gave him a glance without speaking. Jian Wushuang arrived on an empty field. Let's try. Jian Wushuang's body suddenly moved with a sense of longing in his eyes. Space-time law energy burst out in an instant as his figure suddenly glided out. There were no apparitions as Jian Wushuang moved to the end of the field in a flash and was back to where he was in another. From beginning to end, his figure did not leave a trace, at least to bare eyes in the void, such that even the ordinary Heaven Ultimate Gods would not be able to see his figure. Fast, too fast. Although there were no apparitions, it's 10 times faster than when forming apparitions. This speed is a whole other concept altogether. Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Speed had always been his forte. The speed that he previously had could be considered extremely fast among Heaven Ultimate Gods. However, it was not comparable to his newly possessed speed. Jian Wushuang believed that even ordinary primary-level Heaven Ultimate Gods would not have time to react if he were to perform attacks with such terrifying speeds. Even if high-level Heaven Ultimate God could respond, their defense would still seem very embarrassing under his high-speed attacks. Law understanding would become harder and harder from then on. In the first stage of space-time law, one's understanding would increase following the increase of apparitions alongside one's speed increment. However, ordinary primary-level Heaven Ultimate Gods who studied space-time law could only form 300 to 400 apparitions at most. One had to be a high-level Heaven Ultimate God to be able to form 600 or 700 apparitions. Forming 1,000 apparitions was the first stage's limit. Many top high-level Heaven Ultimate Gods or even ordinary peak Heaven Ultimate Gods could reach that level. Jian Wushuang was also once at that level. However, there were not many who could reach the second stage of space-time law even among peak Heaven Ultimate Gods, but Jian Wushuang did. In other words, his existing understanding of space-time law was extremely strong even amongst peak Heaven Ultimate Gods, and so was his speed. Many peak Heaven Ultimate Gods would not be able to catch up to his speed. Furthermore, his space-time energy control had increased a great deal after arriving at that level, which did not only show in his speed. There were many more. Space-time, strangulation. Jian Wushuang's body shook as huge strangulation energy burst out and covered the entire field within it. The strangulation energy was extremely overpowering and cutting everything in a frenzy. He was certain that cultivators below Heaven Ultimate Gods would have turned into tiny bits in the blink of an eye were they to be in the field. Even the ordinary primary-level Heaven Ultimate Gods would find it difficult to fend off the strangulation energy. Most importantly, one could not hide at all under that strangulation energy like many space-time tactics like the space-time apparition and would be crushed in a split second. At that moment, Jian Wushuang gradually raised his palms as the huge strangulation energy around him gathered in his hands. In the blink of an eye, a half-meter-length small shapeless wind blade appeared in Jian Wushuang's hand. Although the wind blade was not big, its power and strangulation energy contained therein was terrifyingly strong. Chapter 2663, Space-Time Blade. Is this the space-time blade after reaching the space-time law second stage? Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he examined the invisible blade in his hand. The space-time blade was formed by condensing the strangulation power. It was powerful enough to destroy the world. The space-time blade was not only good as a weapon but could also be integrated into one's moves and techniques. Jian Wushuang as a sword cultivator could integrate the space-time blade into his sword techniques. Let's try it. Jian Wushuang was eager to try out the blade as Blood Mountain Sword appeared in his hand before swinging his sword out. It was just an ordinary sword movement with him just casually wielding his sword, but with the space-time blade enveloping his sword technique. The power of his sword technique and space-time blade's strangulation power superimposed on each other as his sword fell. The erupted power disrupted the void before him. This power, Jian Wushuang was amazed. He just did a casual move, but even such sword power was probably capable of threatening an ordinary high-level heaven ultimate god. Even a casual sword movement would be terrifying with this space-time blade. The power will be even more powerful if combined with the space-time sword technique I've created. Jian Wushuang clasped both hands together. Moreover, I've just reached the second stage of space-time law and only managed to control the space-time blade's first style as of now. I'm sure there's still a huge room for improvement in the future. Just like the space-time apparition, space-time blade was capable of becoming stronger as Jian Wushuang made progress in space-time law. Rumor had it that those experts who reached the second stage understanding in space-time law could single-handedly discharge hundreds or even 1,000 space-time blades, with each space-time blades powerful enough to kill a primary-level heaven ultimate god. How horrible would it be for a discharge of hundreds or even 1,000 space-time blades at the same time? It would simply be a nightmare when they were sent forth if those hundreds of space-time blades were condensed and integrated into his offensive moves. Understanding the laws will get harder with progress. I've just reached the second stage and gained control of space-time blade's first style. I'm afraid I'll be quite a while before I can take control of the second style, muttered Jian Wushuang indifferently. He had a very high understanding of the space-time law, but the same could not be said for his transmigration law understanding, which was quite far behind. His understanding of transmigration law had also reached the first stage's limits and was only one step away from the second stage, but who knew when he would finally be able to reach the second stage? In terms of sword principles, profound achievement sword world was common among heaven ultimate gods. However, his sword world could extend up to 100,000 miles when Jian Wushuang displayed its full potential with powers comparable to a complete sword world, with Jian Wushuang's sword world probably being stronger. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's understanding of laws and sword principles was considered strong among the heaven ultimate gods. The only part he lacked was his cultivation realm. I've stayed in front of the space-time beast for more than half a month. I wonder if Sewer and Palace Keeper Sijin have gotten the divine elixir pills for me? Jian Wushuang immediately went to visit Palace Keeper Sijin. Inside a huge manor in the sacred palace. Jian, this is where you'll live. I've made it clear that no one should disturb you unless there's something urgent. In addition, there are 2 message tokens here belonging to 2 very powerful sacred palace elders. You can send a message to these 2 elders if you have any needs during your time in the sacred palace. Feel free to message me if they aren't able to help you. Palace Keeper Sijin handed 2 tokens to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly after receiving both tokens. He knew that Palace Keeper Sijin was busy due to his position in the sacred palace, so he would not have time to deal with petty matters. Most of the day-to-day issues were left in the hands of sacred palace elders. Here's an interspatial ring which the fort master asked me to give you a few days ago. It contains the divine elixir pills you need. The fort master was unable to prepare many of them for you in such a short time frame, only 800. I heard you've been meditating in the space-time hall, so I didn't interrupt you at that time, hence I'll give this to you now. Palace Keeper Sijin gave an interspatial ring to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang simply glanced inside and there were indeed 800 divine elixir pills within. 800 pills. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. 800 divine elixir pills were only a measly amount to the fort master of Danyang Holy Domain, but Jian Wushuang was aware of the difficult situation Sewer was in. She must have paid a huge price or sacrificed a great deal to gather those 800 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang would not complain about it. Besides, those 800 divine elixir pills were enough to raise his cultivation realm by another level. Alright, I've handed it to you, so I'll make a move first as I still have a lot of matters to deal with. Carry on with your cultivation and don't let the two fort masters down, said Palace Keeper Sijin solemnly before turning around and leaving. Jian Wushuang looked at the interspatial ring in his hand with a strange expression after Palace Keeper Sijin left. Yin Suer must have high expectations of me for her to willingly gather 800 divine elixir pills in her current situation. I can't let her down if that's the case. Jian Wushuang smiled. He then immediately began refining and absorbing those divine elixir pills' power in seclusion within the manor's secret chamber. He had sold 10 caddies of royal blood gems and liquid life, to get a total of 520 divine elixir pills in Wushui territory 28 years ago. He only needed 120 divine elixir pills to successfully make a breakthrough from the primary level Earth Ultimate God realm to the high-level Earth Ultimate God realm. He absorbed and refined the remaining 400 divine elixir pills to accumulate some divine power in his body. In the last 28 years, he had absorbed a fair bit of divine power on his own, which meant that he had accumulated quite a lot of divine power. Therefore, he was not too far from making a breakthrough to the peak Earth Ultimate God realm. Jian Wushuang predicted that he should be able to break through and reach the peak Earth Ultimate God realm had he refined and absorbed all 800 divine elixir pills before him. It took Jian Wushuang a full 5 months to absorb all 800 divine elixir pills and manage to make a breakthrough and reach the peak Earth Ultimate God realm as he had intended. His divine power skyrocketed again as soon as he made a breakthrough, with his overall strength increased by leaps and bounds. Chapter 2664. Be Mine. My divine power has skyrocketed again after making a breakthrough to peak Earth Ultimate God realm. I should now be able to fight head-on with any peak Earth Ultimate God I met when coupled with the improvement on space-time law. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly. Oh, right. Jian Wushuang was suddenly reminded of something and flipped his hand to take out a baby's fist-sized golden stone. Jian Wushuang stared strangely at the golden stone. It was the golden stone he bought from the Star-Picking Pavilion auction for the price of 5 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang bought it despite no one being interested in the golden stone at the time because he felt faint traces of the space-time fluctuation within the golden stone due to his familiarity with the space-time law. He carefully looked into it after his purchase and was certain of the golden stone's extraordinaire, but his understanding of space-time law was too low for him to find out more about the golden stone at that time. He thought of trying again once his space-time law understanding had greatly improved. Jian Wushuang sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and sent his soul power into the stone. He soon sensed the space-time fluctuations in the golden stone again, which was clearer this time. He gradually formed a connection with the golden stone through those sensations. The connection established was like a key to unlocking the secret chamber's door as he finally discovered the mystery within the golden stone. Rumbling, Jian Wushuang felt his world turn and head buzzing. He found himself in a huge space-time storm in the blink of an eye. The space-time storm flooded all corners of the world with strangulation powers far more powerful than Jian Wushuang's space-time blade. Moreover, space-time was frozen in many places within the space-time storm's coverage. There were also pieces of space that were constantly being shattered up and reorganized. It was indeed a huge space-time world, just like the space-time world created by Jian Wushuang in Thousand Treasures' Grand World. However, its features and strength were much more powerful and impressive. An extremely tall, magnificent-looking golden palace gate was located right in the center of the space-time storm with a hint of mystery inside it. Jian Wushuang could sense the vast space-time powers within it which seemed to lead toward a different space-time. Jian Wushuang was standing under the golden palace. He raised his head to look at the awe-inspiring palace gate before him and was shocked to feel a great level of pressure. Where is this place? Jian Wushuang was scanning his surroundings. He knew he was inside a consciousness space. Consciousness spaces were simulations, and the fact that it felt so real only meant the void existed in the real world. A similar special space existed within the ancient god domain that had the same magnificent golden palace gates just like the one in front of him. So the magnificent golden gate before me is the mystery within this golden stone? Jian Wushuang murmured. Suddenly a primitive yet attractive breath of aura permeated from within the palace gates. A mighty voice also came from the other side of the palace gate. Come through the space-time gate, enter my space-time palace, and become one of my people. The voice seemed to contain some special magical power as it reverberated in Jian Wushuang's ears again and again, refusing to go away for a long time. Jian Wushuang stood under the Golden Palace gate and was completely startled. He had inferred the Golden Stone's true purpose. The Golden Stone was a standard trial that would bring one's consciousness into the Golden Palace gate's consciousness space as long as they could sense the space-time fluctuations in the Golden Stone and form connections with it. On the other side of the Golden Palace gates was the Space-Time Palace mentioned by the voice. Space-Time Palace. There was also a Space-Time Palace within the Sacred Palace housing a space-time beast in it which had helped him make great progress in understanding the space-time law. Jian Wushuang could see that the space-time palace before him was unusual from its golden gate to the crazy space-time storm and astounding tactics coupled with the mysterious golden stone. It was very likely made by some true top powers within the ancient god domain. The likes of Sacred Palace or even the 9 realms of Golden Crow could be compared to. Besides that, he could see from the name Space-Time Palace to the tactics exposed to him, the palace was all about space-time. Jian Wushuang was able to arrive in that space with the golden stones helped due to his familiarity with space-time law. There were 2 paths laid before him. To go in or not? Jian Wushuang was hesitating. According to the voice he heard, he would be a member of the palace once he crossed the Golden Palace gates. However, he knew nothing about the palace or what it did and also had no idea which camp he should be in. Even if the Space-Time Palace was in the same camp as the 3 great sacred realms in ancient god domain, it would be interesting for him to get into the Space-Time Palace which might be guided by the head of 3 divine realms. In addition, there was an important point in which he did not know where the strength of the Space-Time Palace lay and whether it would be controlling the experts reporting to it. He did not dare to enter the palace due to these considerations. If he refused to enter the palace, not everyone was able to appear in the space or stand in front of the Golden Palace gate and enter the gate to become a member of the Space-Time Palace. Judging from the golden stone he possessed, it was a great opportunity for him to improve in understanding the space-time law. He was tempted with such a great opportunity presented before him. Jian Wushuang hesitated for a long time in front of the Golden Palace gates before finally raising his head. Let's take a chance. There was a sparkle of anticipation in his eyes. Such a great opportunity is in front of me. I can't waste it as I can't be bothered too much about the position and nature of this space-time palace. Even if the space-time palace is in the same camp as the 3 great sacred realms, the enemy of the 7 stars black sect, it'll find a way to escape after growing stronger. Jian Wushuang finally decided after taking a deep breath before stepping out and entering the Golden Palace gates. Chapter 2665. Space-Time Divine Technique. Outside the Golden Palace gates was a huge space-time storm. However, on the other end of the Golden Palace gate was a dark and calm void. Jian Wushuang stood on the void's periphery while looking straight ahead with a dazed look. A figure stood tall in front of him where his eyes were focused. The figure was 3 yards tall and wearing a simple but clean white robe. The figure seems vague from where Jian Wushuang was, so he could not see its appearance very well. All he could perceive was the figure standing in the center of the dark void with his hands behind his back. The entire dark void was extremely quiet with not the slightest sound nor movement. Jian Wushuang was staring at the tall figure in a white robe who gave him a weird feeling. It seemed that the figure was standing in the void right in front of Jian Wushuang, yet felt like it might not even exist after all in spacetime. The tall figure in a white robe appeared out of place, but also seemed to have completely integrated with his surrounding spacetime. It was out of place, yet it seemed to perfectly blend in. The two were completely different concepts from each other, but at the same time appeared simultaneously in the tall white-robed figure. This person, Jian Wushuang, was confused. A dozen figures came into the dark void at an astonishing speed not far from away without warning and instantly broke the calmness. Even though it was quite far away, The sound of breaking winds produced by those figures moving through the void could be heard from Jian Wushuang's location. Jian Wushuang immediately looked in that direction and noticed a total of 13 males and females in the void. Although Jian Wushuang could not sense their divine power breath, his instincts told him that any one of them could give him quite a bit of scare. He was sure those 13 people were at least undying saints or higher. Among the 13 undying saints, one of them was a fair-skinned bald boy who was running away from the remaining 12 people chasing after him frantically at the back. They were incredibly fast in the chase and flee. Jian Wushuang thought he was fast enough after achieving the second stage in space-time law, but was shocked to discover that he was still far behind when compared with any of those 13 people. At the speed they were going, those 13 people instantly appeared in front of both Jian Wushuang and the tall white-robed figure. Is that person going to take action? Jian Wushuang immediately looked at the tall white-robed figure. The tall white-robed figure then made a move as expected. Jian Wushuang thought the tall white-robed figure had unfathomable power and might perhaps display his magnificent power to rescue the bald boy. However, the white-robed figure did not do much at all. Nothing was coming out of his body, not his aura nor divine power breath. He slowly raised his right hand and pointed at the void where those 12 experts were. All he did was point a finger. Jian Wushuang did not see explosive divine power from the figure, but the pointing finger had moved the world and space-time. The 12 experts who were madly chasing after the bald boy stopped in their tracks abruptly without any warning. They had stopped in their tracks while still keeping their skimming posture such that even their expressions were frozen in place. Apart from their frozen statues, even their surrounding void had completely become stagnant. It felt as though space-time had completely stopped. Space-time had indeed gone completely still. As space-time in the void completely halted, the 12 experts in the void maintained the same posture along with their thoughts, and consciousness also stopped. The space-time in other voids was still normal without a change apart from the void surrounding those 12 experts. The tall white-robed figure slowly stepped forward and approached the bald boy and took him away. The void's space-time began to flow again once both of them had completely walked away. The 12 experts had also resumed their motions but were struck in the daze while staring around blankly. They did not know what had happened as even their consciousness was halted. They remembered chasing after the bald boy before he suddenly disappeared right under their noses. As for the actual events, they knew and noticed nothing. Jian Wushuang saw everything that transpired while standing on the dark void's edge. Did space-time just went completely still? Jian Wushuang's eyes widened in shock. It was horrifying. The tall white-robed figure had used a horrifying tactic. Jian Wushuang was frightened. The space-time in the vast void stopped with just a finger pointed from a distance. What an incredible power! Jian Wushuang had the opportunity to witness such supernatural power with his own eyes in the consciousness space. A message suddenly popped into his head just as Jian Wushuang was still in shock. Space-time divine technique, a finger-pointing heavenly technique. Jian Wushuang was both physically and mentally shocked. He finally obtained the finger technique's name the tall white-robed figure had just displayed and also understood the reason behind his appearance in the dark void. It turned out the Golden Palace gates were not leading to a space-time palace, but into a consciousness space with unique secret techniques. The secret technique was called Space-Time Divine Technique. It was not a secret technique to be precise, but a divine technique. Jian Wushuang did not know what divine technique was, but the finger movement the tall white-robed figure used earlier had astonished him. In his previous life, he had also seen many top experts in the ancient god domain like the head of 3 divine realms performing their tactics with many of their methods being able to be fully displayed due to world constraints. The ones that they could perform did not impress Jian Wushuang. If he had to pick the most memorable one, it was his master Xian Yi's tactic to resurrect both his and Leng Rushuang's souls. The space-time inversion technique. He was sleeping when his master performed the space-time inversion technique, so he technically did not see his master performing it. In any case, the tactic the tall white-robed figure had just performed was shocking enough. The tactic called a finger-pointing heavenly technique was part of the space-time secret technique. Chapter 2666. A finger-pointing heavenly technique. A finger-pointing heavenly technique concept was by quickly freezing the space-time of a certain area. It was equivalent to a space-time freeze tactic. The tactic was powerful and terrifying. The tall, white-robed figure Jian Wushuang just saw did not show the technique's full potential. Among the messages Jian Wushuang received, the divine technique was able to freeze a continent to which the space-time could remain stagnant for 100 years to thousands and at the extreme even tens of thousands of years. In other words, tens of thousands of years would have passed but time would not move by even a second in the frozen continent. That was unbelievable. In the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang had already walked out of the consciousness space and slowly opened his eyes. The finger-pointing heavenly technique is scary, but it's only one of the many tricks in space-time divine technique. Jian Wushuang exclaimed. A finger-pointing heavenly technique was not the only technique in space-time divine technique. Jian Wushuang discovered from the golden stone that there were at least two types of magical power, and the A finger-pointing heavenly technique was just one of the techniques. As for the other technique, Jian Wushuang was probably unable to sense it due to his still shallow perception of the space-time law. Jian Wushuang looked at the golden stone strangely. The golden stone brought me into the consciousness space and made me form a connection with space-time palace, but the golden stone did not contain any information about the space-time palace, but only contained two types of space-time divine technique. What could the golden stone made by the space-time palace do? Jian Wushuang was quite puzzled. That was a question he could not answer for the time being. Just let it be. The space-time divine technique is so powerful and happens to appear before me, so I can't miss it. I'll start with figuring out a finger-pointing heavenly technique. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and soon he closed his eyes and began meditating meticulously. He could enter the consciousness space at will through the connection he formed with the golden stone in his hand. As such, he repeatedly watched the scene performed by the tall, white-robed figure while personally experiencing the tactic's effects and potentials amidst also figuring out how to master the technique. He had all the conditions needed to master the technique except sufficient perception capabilities. Jian Wushuang had always been fast in understanding laws and techniques. He was completely immersed in meditating and trying to understand the technique such that he had completely forgotten about everything else. Time flew past. The sacred palace had been calm with many disciples using various resources in the sacred palace to improve their strength. As for the Crimson Stone Fort, Yin Suer was indeed in a worrisome situation before Jian Wushuang's arrival. The pressure on her had reduced a fair bit as the situation in Crimson Stone Fort stabilized once again after Jian Wushuang gave the blood gems to Yin Suer. It was like giving her a chance in a new life. There were no major events in the Crimson Stone Fort. 9 years passed in a flash under such a calm situation. Jian Wushuang, who had been meditating for 9 years in the secret chamber, finally opened his eyes. I barely mastered a finger-pointing heavenly technique after 9 years. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together with a surprised look. As a perfect chaotic creature, Jian Wushuang had exceptional comprehension skills. He was extremely fast in comprehending various secret techniques and tactics. The 5 strongest secret techniques from the 7 Stars Black Sect were easy for him as he only spent a very short time on them. However, he had spent altogether 9 years in full concentration to comprehend a finger-pointing heavenly technique. The divine technique was indeed hard to comprehend. Although I've just barely grasped the technique, I'm afraid the power I'm able to discharge is just 1 out of 1,000% from its full potential. It's currently still quite useful for me. At the same time, my understanding of space-time law has also improved a lot. I can go to the space-time beast next and try to process what I've managed to master in the past 9 years. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He soon stood up and headed to the space-time palace located in the sacred palace. A large number of Sacred Palace disciples and experts were gathered on a vast combat field in the Sacred Palace with an ongoing battle in the center of the combat field. A series of spear shadows with powerful strangulation power emerged. A girl clothed in black with a menacing look had completely blended into the darkness while the spear in her hand was like a poisonous snake. The extremely powerful spear was moving around strangely and swiftly. The huge principal world spread far and wide as the black-clothed girl was fighting against a quite well-known high-level Earth Ultimate God disciple from the Sacred Palace. The genius disciple had an extremely high understanding of the laws and principles. However, he looked exceptionally awkward in front of the black-clothed girl. He was wielding his saber, but it was neither a match against the black girl's spear in terms of speed nor power. The genius principal world was completely suppressed as the black-clothed girl's dark law perception was much higher. Suppression. The battle was all about suppression from the beginning. A moment later, the high-level Earth Ultimate God Genius disciple was easily defeated by the black-clothed girl. After she defeated the genius disciple, the black-clothed girl withdrew her spear and stood there shaking her head. Weak, so weak. He's very ordinary whether in terms of his perception in law or principles understanding. I'm afraid he's just mediocre among the high-level Earth Ultimate God disciples of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. The black-clothed girl was telling the truth as she spoke her mind without any sugar-coating. Perhaps it had something to do with her personality. There were a large number of Sacred Palace disciples around with some experts from Sacred Palace looking a little ugly when they heard her statement. They were helpless. The genius who had just been defeated by the black-clothed girl was the top disciple among the high-level Earth Ultimate Gods in Sacred Palace, yet he was still easily defeated by the black-clothed girl. It did not just happen once. 3 figures were standing behind the black-clothed girl. The 3 figures with a touch of chilliness and arrogance between their eyebrows looked very young, but their divine power breaths were extraordinary. Chapter 2667. Someone familiar just like the black-clothed girl, those 3 people were also from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. They were the black-clothed girl's 3 senior brothers who were much stronger than the black-clothed girl in terms of cultivation realms and overall strength. Among the black-clothed girl's 3 senior brothers, 2 Peak Earth Ultimate Gods had already taken action against the Sacred Palace's Peak Earth Ultimate Gods. The Sacred Palace disciples had no room for struggle and were not a match to the both of them. They were frustrated and angry from their incapability, but could only hold back their emotions. They were secretly sighing in their hearts. They were also geniuses from the Sacred Palace, but the geniuses recruited by Dragon Phoenix Pavilion from all over the 9 realms of Golden Crows were much stronger. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's talented disciples were not only better in terms of their overall strength but also in other aspects. What are the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples doing here at Sacred Palace? Are they here just to show off their talents and strength? Who knows? We aren't the one who invited them to come anyway. I heard that the people from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had taken the initiative to visit Sacred Palace and paid a price to gather Sacred Palace disciples at the Space-Time Palace. The palace keeper must have agreed to us disciples learning from each other as he wanted the talented disciples from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to show us a thing or two so we know how far behind we are and quit being arrogant. Did the palace keeper do that? Many of the Sacred Palace disciples were secretly passing comments as they felt the bitterness in their hearts. It was true that those Sacred Palace disciples were arrogant as they had always thought of themselves as geniuses. However, they were nobodies in the face of those Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. The failure would probably teach them a lesson not to be complacent in the future. The black-clothed girl made her way to her 3 senior brothers. They are too weak, so there's no point in fighting against them, said the black-clothed girl in disappointment. I've told you not to have too high hopes. A young man with red hair smiled. If the Crimson Stone Fort had not fallen to their current state, the potential of their geniuses could be extremely high. Even though they might not be as good as us, the gap should not be so ridiculously wide. However, the level of Sacred Palace concentration camps geniuses are no longer on par with us. Indeed, I heard some elders in the attic mention that Sacred Palace is no longer what it used to be after the fall of Crimson Stone Saint. It'll probably take a lot of luck and a long time for them to cultivate a truly presentable genius as they haven't had any in the last 1,000 years, said another handsome young man with a half-moon-like face. We've already fought these Sacred Palace disciples per the Palace Keeper Sijin's requirements and have achieved what we wanted. There's no need to waste time with them. Let's go to the Space-Time Palace now. Among the many cultivation places within the Sacred Palace, Only the space-time beast inside the space-time palace could be helpful to us, said a cold voice. It was the burly man at the back with a dark golden stone staff on his back. Yes, senior brother Tian Exin. The black-clothed girl along with the other two Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples immediately nodded when the burly man spoke, no longer dared to talk anymore. Those people from Dragon Phoenix Pavilion soon went straight to the space-time palace led by the experts from Sacred Palace. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged under the space-time beast with a regretful look. What a pity! Although the space-time beast is amazing, its evolution in space-time law had only reached the early stage of its strangulation power. My current space-time law understanding is already at this level. It'll only allow me to be more familiar with the space-time law if I continue doing this, and that's not much use to me. Jian Wushuang quickly walked out of the space-time palace after shaking his head. As he stepped out of the space-time palace, Jian Wushuang coincidentally bumped into the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples who were walking toward him. Many disciples as well as Sacred Palace experts were following behind the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. So many people? Jian Wushuang was surprised. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples had also noticed Jian Wushuang. It's him! A low voice suddenly came from the black-clothed girl among the 4 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples. This black-clothed girl who ravaged many high-level Earth Ultimate God disciples from Sacred Palace in the battle earlier was powerful and had treated the other Sacred Palace disciples condescendingly, but she was stunned to see Jian Wushuang. Her eyes became extremely solemn while she stared closely at Jian Wushuang. Oh, someone familiar? Jian Wushuang also noticed the black-clothed girl as the corner of his mouth curled up. That was not the first time he saw the black-clothed girl, as they had even fought against each other before. He recalled that the other party had shown some extraordinary techniques and even brought him a little pressure, hence the black-clothed girl was rather memorable to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang later learned that the black-clothed girl was a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Junior sister, do you know this person? The red-haired young man next to her looked over. Of course I do. The black-clothed girl's voice became low. The 3 of you should have heard me talking about him before. I went on a mission to an ordinary stellar region decades ago while still a primary-level ultimate god and fought against a similarly ranked genius before being defeated. I heard you mention this before. Could he be the one? The red-haired young man immediately turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. The handsome young man with the half-moon face and even the cold-looking burly man Tian Exin also shot a glance at Jian Wushuang. That's him. The black-clothed girl was the 5th opponent Jian Wushuang encountered during the Blood Gladiator Challenge on the northern Darkstar continent. The ancient witch said in a low voice, I was defeated by his shocking strength decades ago and haven't seen him for decades. I didn't expect him to be at the Sacred Palace. He seems to be one of the Sacred Palace disciples and his cultivation realm. He made a breakthrough at a faster pace than me? The ancient witch was a little horrified when she noticed that. She was the much-loved Dragon Phoenix Pavilion princess with a powerful master guiding her alongside a steady supply of resources for self-improvement. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang had to collect a large number of primordial stones and divine elixir pills to improve his divine power, while the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion paid a great price to construct a divine power fountain. Chapter 2668. The stakes. The divine power fountain in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion contained unlimited divine power, allowing her to achieve high-level Earth Ultimate God from primary-level Ultimate God within a short period of 10 years because it obviously had a lot to do with her being talented and fast at understanding the laws and principles. However, the ancient witch did not expect Jian Wushuang's realm cultivation to not only be comparable with her but was even at an entire realm higher. She could feel Jian Wushuang's divine power that had obviously achieved peak-level Earth Ultimate God. How did he cultivate? The ancient witch directly rushed forward with a slight doubtfulness. Jian Yi, we meet again. The ancient witch spoke in a cold and slightly unfriendly voice. This is quite a coincidence. Who knew I'll bump into you here at the Sacred Palace? Jian Wushuang was also quite surprised as he knew the ancient witch's identity. The heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion actually came to this sacred palace? The ancient witch had a cold look in her eyes. Humph, did you remember what I've previously said? I ask that you don't bump into me again, or it'll definitely get you back next time and win. I've finally met you today. There's nothing else apart from fighting me. Fight against you? Are you sure? Jian Wushuang had an interesting smile as he unscrupulously emitted his peak Earth Ultimate God Divine Power. His divine power was obviously one whole level stronger than the ancient witch. The ancient witch's face darkened and immediately shouted in a low voice, "If you are considerate, you'll only use the high-level Earth Ultimate God's divine power similar to mine. Let's decide our victory based on our law's perception and principles understanding. What do you think?" Jian Wushuang's facial expression grew weirder as he heard that. The Sacred Palace disciples were also behaving extremely weirdly. Who's this? Is he also a disciple of our Sacred Palace? Why haven't we met him before? Yes, he's also a Sacred Palace disciple who entered via the Sacred Heaven Road 9 years ago. I heard rumors that he's very talented but has always been in seclusion and seldom shows himself ever since entering the Sacred Palace. I wonder why he came out today. He seems to be an old acquaintance of the ancient witch who has proactively challenged him. Sounds of chatters started surrounding them one by one. Wan Wushuang smiled indifferently. It's not every day the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's heavenly pride proactively challenges somebody. There's no reason for me not to accept this challenge. We shall follow your suggestion and he'll only fight against you using the high-level Earth Ultimate God's divine power. However, it doesn't seem interesting if we fight for nothing. Why don't we bet on something? Bet on something? A gamble fight? The ancient witch narrowed her eyes. The Sacred Palace disciples had surprised expressions on their faces. He actually brought up a gamble fight when he's fighting against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple? This Jian Yi is really daring. He must have plucked his courage from the skies. Although he's a peak-level Earth Ultimate God, the perception of the laws and understanding principles aren't differentiated by realms or levels. Although the ancient witch is only at the high-level Earth Ultimate God, you can see that her law's perception and principles understanding is almost as good as a Heaven Ultimate God based on her actions. He must be suicidal to fight her. He brought up the gamble fight? Oh my God! All the Sacred Palace disciples felt that Jian Wushuang was extremely daring. The other heavenly prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion speechlessly looked at each other while smiling. They obviously were thinking the same as the Sacred Palace disciples. The ancient witch had her gaze set on Jian Wushuang. This Jian, he was able to defeat me in the previous fight because of his much stronger divine power than mine. However, his law perception and principles understanding weren't stronger than mine as he didn't even have a clue about the principal world back then. His combat power might be stronger now that he has achieved peak Earth Ultimate God, but his only advantage will be his divine power. Divine power aside, he definitely won't be my opponent based on his law's perception and principles understanding alone. The ancient witch was extremely confident. She was a genius. What did it mean by being a genius in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? Speedy level-ups in realms and cultivation meant nothing. A real genius would have scary improvements in law perception and principles understanding. Jian Wushuang could not be considered a true genius yet in her opinion. The ancient witch asked, "Jian Yi, what do you want to bet on? I know that you're from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and every Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple is from rich families. Let's bet on divine elixir pills since you're rich," said Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch directly said, "Divine elixir pills? Not a problem. How many do you want to bet?" "Not much, 100 pills," said Jian Wushuang without much care. "What?" The ancient witch was stunned. The Sacred Palace experts and those disciples around them were also shocked. Even the three prides of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion also glanced at Jian Wushuang in surprise. 100 divine elixir pills? Those were divine elixir pills and not primordial stones. One divine elixir pill was equal to 5 million primordial stones in the market using the simplest calculations. 100 divine elixir pills would be 500 million primordial stones. This was only using a simple calculation, and 100 divine elixir pills were definitely valued more than such. Jian Yi stood in front of her and just mentioned betting 100 divine elixir pills without any hesitation. How were 100 divine elixir pills a small amount? But the heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can't even come up with 100 divine elixir pills? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. No, it's just that, the ancient witch had a tight frown on her face. She was capable of coming up with 100 divine elixir pills, but that would be her entire savings. Apart from that, she would need to exchange it with some really special precious items, not to mention that she only had a dozen with her right now. At that moment, Junior, the red-haired young man from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, looked over. It's only 100 divine elixir pills. Just focus on fighting him. All 3 of your senior brothers will help gather these 100 divine elixir pills if you lose. Apart from divine power, how is it possible for you to lose to a sacred palace disciple with your abilities? The ancient witch was stunned before nodding. That's right. There's a difference between our divine power in the previous fight, but this time, I won't lose for sure. I'll bet with 100 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang had a weird smile when he saw the ancient witch agreeing to his terms. If that's the case, let's start. Humph. The ancient witch humphed softly and immediately made her move without any hesitation. Rumbling. It could be seen that a huge principal world was directly forced towards Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch had activated her principal world when she was at the primary level ultimate god. Her principal world grew increasingly stronger as her principal's understanding was elevated, which resulted in her current extremely powerful 30,000 kilometers principal world. Chapter 2669. Winning, she has succeeded in reaching the profound achievement principal world. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. In the Danyang Holy Domain, only some powerful peak Earth ultimate gods had achieved profound achievement in their principal worlds. Although the ancient witch was just at the Earth high-level ultimate god, she was the heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. It was impossible for her not to achieve it. The overpowering principal world repressed against Jian Wushuang, who did not immediately activate his sword world to contend against it. He stood there in silence as the ancient witch disappeared in the darkness. A wave of strong wind came from the back of Jian Wushuang as the space behind him seemed to distort and open before a black spear came flying towards him like an awakened dragon, along with an outburst of frightening power. Jian Wushuang slightly moved his body as the black spear flew past him and swept past the side of his clothes. However, the ancient witch waved her hand before slightly moving her body, which resulted in forming hundreds of her apparitions before all of them concurrently rushed towards Jian Wushuang. The ancient witch had meditated on both the dark and space-time law. Hence her dark law understanding was quite defined, while that of the space-time was just ordinary. She had come to the space-time palace to raise her insights towards space-time law. The cold spears continuously pierced towards Jian Wushuang with shocking power, while Jian Wushuang fluttered his body freely like an erratic cloud. B****, I dare you not to move. The ancient witch shouted softly. Jian Wushuang mocked. Ha! You are too slow. He did not make any moves and only fluttered in the sky at his speed. This had already caused the ancient witch's attacks to fail at reaching him. The ancient witch failed to bump or even touch Jian Wushuang for a long period as Jian Wushuang evaded her attacks. This made the ancient witch extremely angry. At this moment, Jian Wushuang made a sudden move. He took the opportunity and rushed toward her when the ancient witch retracted her spears. He only used his finger as his sword, and a raw sword light directly hit the ancient witch's body without any obstruction. This attack was unable to hurt the ancient witch as she had defensive measures on top of wearing defensive armor underneath her clothes. However, she still turned pale. You've lost. Jian Wushuang slowly spoke. The ancient witch slightly trembled and held her fists tightly with her nails already dug into her flesh. She had lost, she had really lost. She had completely lost without any grounds to struggle and fight back. There was a huge gap in their differences. Space-time law. This guy has an extremely high understanding of space-time law. The ancient witch looked upwards and stared at Jian Wushuang. She was not the only one. Her 3 other seniors were also staring at Jian Wushuang at this moment. All of them saw the battle. Jian Wushuang had only evaded the ancient witch's attacks with his speed from the beginning. The ancient witch was really strong with powerful means, with her spear movements speedy and extremely powerful. However, it did not matter how powerful her spear movements were, as it was useless as long as she could not touch her opponent. Jian Yi moved too fast. He easily defeated the ancient witch with his absolute speed in this fight. The Sacred Palace experts and disciples standing around the fighting area were also slightly stunned. He won. He won over one of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's heavenly pride? He moves too fast and has a high-level understanding of space-time law. No wonder he dared to proactively make a gamble. Turns out he's confident he'll win. Who knew there's a genius with such a high understanding of space-time law in our Sacred Palace? The Sacred Palace disciples were all sighing. They previously felt that Jian Wushuang was extremely arrogant when he proactively requested a gamble fight and made a bet of 100 divine elixir pills. However, the situation at that moment, Jian Wushuang had kicked everybody's asses with his actions. 100 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang looked at the ancient witch with a smile on his face while stretching his right hand out. The ancient witch gritted her teeth and was about to take those pills out and give Jian Wushuang when, "Let's not be in a hurry." The voice of someone speaking was heard before the red-haired young man, who was one of the ancient witch's seniors, slowly walked forward. He arrived in front of the ancient witch and comforted her. "Junior, both victory and defeat are normal during battles, especially when Jian Yi has a higher peak Earth Ultimate God realm compared to you. He still has great natural advantages even though he did not use his peak Earth Ultimate God's divine power. It's normal for you to lose, so there's no need to be caught up by this." The ancient witch slightly nodded. Although she was unable to resign over her failure, she should not be defeated after only losing twice to Jian. Her name, which had mentioned a lot about her character and style of handling matters. The red-haired man looked towards Jian Wushuang after comforting the ancient witch. "You're Jenny? My name is Leng Xing and am also a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Are you also interested in carrying out a gamble fight with me?" Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. "Of course, I cannot pretend it's nothing when I see my junior is being bullied as her senior brother," said Leng Xing. "We can carry out another gamble fight, but you need to give me the 100 divine elixir pills first," said Jian Wushuang directly. "I'm a Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciple. Do you think I'll refuse to give you some pills?" Leng Xing's facial expression darkened. "That's difficult to say," said Jian Wushuang with a smile. Leng Xing was speechless and could only flip his hand to come up with some divine elixir pills. He gathered the pills alongside the ancient witch before passing 100 of them to Jian Wushuang. "Not bad." Jian Wushuang smiled in satisfaction when he took over the 100 divine elixir pills before glancing at Leng Xing with a growing smile on his face. "You are the senior brother of the ancient witch and also a peak Earth Ultimate God. I'm sure you're much stronger than the ancient witch and richer. Why don't we increase our bet slightly for this fight to 200 divine elixir pills?" 200 divine elixir pills? The corners of Leng Xing's mouth trembled uncontrollably. It was true that he was a heavenly pride of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and not to mention the fact that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was extremely rich. However, divine elixir pills were not like primordial stones that could be easily obtained. He could not come up with 200 pills even after adding up everything he had. "All right, I agree." Leng Xing directly nodded. The ancient witch looked at him and softly said, "Senior brother Leng Xing, Jenny is quite strong and has an extremely high understanding of space-time law. Apart from that, he easily defeated me without using his principal world during our fight just now. He showed divine power far stronger than his level when I was defeated by him, hence you cannot look down at him. This gamble fight." Wu Xian was completely different from them. The reason was not only from being more talented but the crux laid within his current realm. Boom! A strong aura exploded from the burly man, Wu Xin's body. This aura wave was extremely strong and suppressed everybody there. Apart from Jian Wushuang and a small number of Sacred Palace experts, everybody else slightly trembled under the aura's suppression. Heaven Ultimate God. Wu Exin was a true Heaven Ultimate God. He was also an extreme genius. Chapter 2671. Wu Exin. The strong wave of Heaven Ultimate God's divine power suppressed Jian Wushuang's body like a tsunami. The burly man called Wu Xin's cold staring toward Jian Wushuang with both his eyes were like two rays of explosive lightning. Are you sure you want to challenge me? Definitely. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently and seemed extremely at ease under Wu Xin's suppressive aura. How much would you like to bet? Wu Exin asked. My bet just now with Lung Xing was already 200 divine elixir pills. You're a Heaven Ultimate God, so your bet needs to be higher. Let's agree on 500 divine elixir pills, said Jian Wushuang. All right, I agree. Wu Exin directly nodded. We maintain the fight on laws and principles, understanding while I'll take note to hold back my divine power. Let's begin. Wu Exin did not waste time after he finished speaking with his extremely cold voice as his body started moving. The same situation happened as a large number of apparitions appeared. These Dragon Phoenix Pavilion heavenly prides came to the Sacred Palace because of the space-time beast, as all of them had meditated on the space-time law. It was without a doubt that Wu Exin had the highest understanding among them in space-time law. The apparitions that concurrently appeared overwhelmingly blotted out the entire void and ground, as Wu Exin had conjured 1,000 apparitions at that moment. 1,000 apparitions were the limit for apparitions cultivation. Achieving this step meant that Wu Xin's space-time law understanding had reached the peak of the first stage, with his next improvement being achieving the second stage, space-time strangulation. Such a level of understanding was definitely extremely strong among Heaven Ultimate Gods. Many peak Heaven Ultimate Gods were also unable to achieve the second stage space-time strangulation after all. You have quite a good understanding of space-time law. Jian Wushuang only smiled indifferently as 1,000 apparitions also appeared following a slight twitch of his body. A large number of apparitions filled the entire battlefield as both of them were moving at high speeds and soon clashed head-to-head with each other. Clink. Loud clanking sounds of metal on metal could be heard as the people surrounding the battlefield immediately looked towards the sound's origin, but only to see two strong divine powers fighting against each other before another loud humming sound could be heard at another void not far from that location. An Earth Ultimate God's Sacred Palace disciple could not control himself and ask, "See, can you guys see where their true bodies are at?" I can't. I can only see these apparitions while following the sounds. I can't see them too. They are moving too fast. This is true speed. I've seen two primary level Heaven Ultimate Gods fighting, and their speeds were also extremely surprising. However, there's a huge difference between them and these two. Even if hundreds of work together, they'll only be easily killed by those two under such extreme speed. If this was a real battle, as peak Earth Ultimate God's attacks won't be able to touch those two under such scary speed, in addition to having so many apparitions. The surrounding Sacred Palace disciples stood there in shock as they looked at Jian Wushuang and Wu Exin bumping into each other in the middle of the battlefield. However, they only saw them fighting unstoppably, with nobody capable of seeing clearly their true body's location. Sounds of exclamation naturally could be heard expanding. Even the three heavenly prides of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion were also making noises as they saw the course of events before their eyes. Two figures were slowly walking over in the void far away from the battlefield. Brother Si Zhen, I'm sorry for troubling you this time. A black-robed elder with eagle-like eyes was smiling softly. My Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples have met with some bottlenecks in their space-time law understanding, and the space-time beast in your Sacred Palace is quite intriguing. They must be able to learn something after meditating for 1 month in front of the space-time beast in your Sacred Palace. It's no trouble at all. Brother Teng, there's no need to be so polite with me. You've paid a certain price after all. Palace Keeper Si Zhen was also smiling. At this moment, continuous humming noises could be heard from the void in front of them. The black-robed elder and palace keeper Sijin were both surprised. I specifically asked your disciples from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to take action and teach my sacred palace disciples a lesson. However, their interaction should have long finished as so much time passed. Why are they still fighting until now? Palace keeper Sijin was slightly surprised. Let's go over and have a look, said the black-robed elder with a smile. The duo immediately increased their speed and soon arrived at the void outside the space-time palace only to notice the battle in front of them. Wu Xian actually took action? The black-robed elder squinted his eyes when he saw the battlefield scene. The person fighting with him is a peak Earth ultimate god. However, his speed isn't any weaker than Wu Xian and is equal with Wu Xian in this fight? The black-robed elder asked, Palace Keeper Sijin, who's this young guy? He had no idea that Palace Keeper Sijin was slightly stunned at that moment. He definitely recognized the person fighting Wu Xian, and it was none other than Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang had been training in retreat as per his knowledge. When did he come out? He knew slightly about Jian Wushuang's strength. He purposely requested those heavenly prides from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to teach the Sacred Palace disciples a lesson at that time so that his disciples would understand the limits of their abilities on top of wearing down their inner ignorance and create awareness that there were stronger people out there in the world. However, he had not previously considered these Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples would end up fighting with Jian Wushuang. Palace Keeper Sijin replied upon hearing the black-robed elder's question. This guy is Jian Yi and had just become one of the Sacred Palace's disciples. He had been keeping a low profile ever since and had been training in seclusion. I wonder why he suddenly came out from his seclusion today and got involved in the fight against these Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's people. The black-robed elder praised, Jian Yi? This youth is quite good. Although he's just a peak Earth ultimate god, his space-time law understanding has reached the first stage's peak. He's as good as Wu Xian on top of being so brilliant in swordsmanship. Brother Sijin, who would have expected you to have such a strong genius in your sacred palace? Palace Keeper Sijin could only embarrassingly smile. He has a high understanding of space-time law but is sadly only a peak Earth ultimate god. There's still a slight difference between him and Wu Xian. The black-robed elder smiled indifferently. Look, Wu Xian is starting to take things seriously. Palace Keeper Sijin immediately looked over. Sure enough, the duo who were fighting furiously on the battlefield distanced themselves from each other before Wu Xian took out a smaller and thinner golden-purple staff apart from the dark gold staff he initially held in his hand. This golden-purple staff had a very unique aura that was surrounded by a surging space-time law power. Chapter 2672, Another Bet? That's the Evolving Sky Godly Staff? Palace Keeper Sijin squinted his eyes as he recognized the staff. There were all sorts of mystical weapons that suited various laws in the ancient god domain. The Hongjun Golden Sword that Jian Wushuang once controlled was a weapon suitable to be used with space-time law. The Evolving Sky Godly Staff Wu Xian presented at this moment was also suitable for space-time law and was as well known as the Hongjun Golden Sword. The Evolving Sky Godly Staff immediately changed into a ray of golden-purple light under Wu Xin's control as it traveled through the void toward Jian Wushuang. That ray of golden-purple light traveled extremely fast, but the most crucial point was its equally strong power. Jian Wushuang waved his Blood Mountain sword and collided with the golden-purple light twice, which forced his body to move slightly backwards after the collision. You are losing, Wu Xian said with his cold voice as he stared at Jian Wushuang. He admitted that Jian Wushuang's law's perception was much stronger than himself. However, it was still within the manageable range. The golden-purple ray once again attacked Jian Wushuang with even more power than before. This is interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently before also waving his hand. A total of 9 black-colored infernal crimson divine swords appeared at the void in front of him and quietly floated. Go! Those 9 infernal crimson divine swords turned into 9 huge black holes upon Jian Wushuang's finger-pointing before shockingly attacking the golden-purple ray. They met the golden-purple ray head-on within the blink of an eye and caused loud booming sounds. Clink. Clink, clink, clink. Several muffled clunking noises were heard. Although the 9 infernal crimson divine swords had the number advantage, it was still repeatedly sent flying over by the golden-purple ray upon knocking into each other. It's useless. Although your 9 divine swords are quite powerful, their strength is too dispersed and not fast enough. Although I only have 1 Yentian godly staff, it's enough to entirely crush you, Wu Xen said. Really? A playful smile appeared on Jian Wushuang's face before he pointed his right hand again. Swords, combine. Hum. The black holes formed from the 9 infernal crimson divine swords immediately overlapped each other as a vast reincarnation passage appeared out of nowhere. At the end of the reincarnation passage, a black divine sword covered in infinite samsara strength abruptly traveled outward. This black divine sword had a sky-high aura and was extremely fast. It once again knocked into the golden-purple ray of light in the blink of an eye. Clink. It resulted in another huge explosive noise. However, the golden-purple light on the evolving sky godly staff had immediately turned dull upon that collision. The golden-purple light ray abruptly flew outward due to the collision while the black divine sword once again traveled outward as though it was unaffected. Clink, clink. After another 2 head-on collisions, the light on the evolving sky godly staff was almost gone as its power was reduced to almost nothing. How's this possible? Wu Xian was shocked. He had no idea that despite his evolving sky godly staff being strong, it was just a standard weapon generally found in the ancient god domain. However, the extremely strong transmigration sword formation shown by Jian Wushuang was created by Sword Lord Tong Xen. In addition, Jian Wushuang had an extremely high transmigration law understanding of having already reached the peak of the first stage and was not lower than Wu Xin's space-time law understanding. Both were law understanding where the space-time law was faster but its power fell short when being compared with transmigration law. The most important point was Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation mastery being higher with frequent usage than Wu Xin's evolving sky godly staff mastery. It was natural for Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation to easily crush Wu Xin's evolving sky godly staff with the combination of all those 3 points. Time for you to lose. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently before the black divine sword formed from the transmigration sword formation once again exploded outward and directly hit Wu Xin's divine body this time. Jian Wushuang naturally did not use any strength as the black divine sword did not even break Wu Xin's divine body defense. However, the results of this battle had been decided upon arriving at this point. He's lost? Senior brother Wu Xen lost? The 3 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples stood there in disbelief. Wu Xen was one of the publicly recognized top geniuses in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion after all. His talents were sufficient for him to be in the top 10 among all those Dragon Phoenix Pavilion geniuses. In addition, his realm was 1 level higher than Jian Wushuang. How could Wu Xian still lose under such circumstances when both parties were competing in the understanding of laws and principles? Transmigration sword formation. What Jian Yi just used should be the transmigration sword formation, right? The black-robed elder stared at Jian Wushuang with electrified eyes. Yes. Palace Keeper Xizhen nodded as he also recognized it. Congratulations to you, Brother Xizhen. It's been some time since such a clever genius appeared in your sacred palace, said the black-robed elder. I'm just lucky. Just lucky. Palace Keeper Xizhen could only laugh. Wu Xen gritted his teeth as he stared at Jian Wushuang somberly in the void in front of them. Transmigration law. Who knew you'll have such a high understanding of the transmigration law apart from your space-time law understanding that has reached the peak of the first stage? In addition, you have such a powerful sword formation. My loss in this battle isn't an injustice. Wu Xian was not a narrow-minded person. He admitted both his defeat and also his law understanding not being as good as Jian Wushuang even though Jian Wushuang's cultivation realm was a whole level lower than himself. Herace 500 Divine Elixir Pills. Wu Xen flipped his hand and gave Jian Wushuang an interspatial ring. Jian Wushuang scanned the ring after receiving it as a calculative look flashed through his eyes. He only received less than 200 Divine Elixir Pills. Although he made bets and won against the Ancient Witch and Leng Xing during the previous 2 battles, he only received 300 pieces of divine elixir pills, as the rest were replaced with precious items of the same value. However, the 500 divine elixir pills he received from Wu Exen were ready-made divine elixir pills, as Wu Exen did not use any same valued precious items to replace them. This made Jian Wushuang quite happy. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples are really rich, mumbled Jian Wushuang, and suddenly rolled his eyes as an idea emerged from the bottom of his heart. Your name is Wu Exen, right? Jian Wushuang once again looked towards Wu Exen. Yes. Wu Exen nodded. You have an extremely high understanding of the law and are really talented. You must be one of the top geniuses in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. You must be unreconciled with your loss today, as we did only competed on laws and principles understanding without showing any of our other skills after all. Why don't we make another bet? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. Another bet? Wu Exen turned and stared at Jian Wushuang. The people around them also looked at Jian Wushuang in astonishment. Chapter 2673. All-out Jian Wushuang had fought against 3 Dragon Phoenix Pavilion disciples in a row since the beginning of the gamble fight and even won against his strongest opponent, Wu Exen. He wants to fight again? Jian Yi, I admit you're a talented genius, but don't take it too far. Wu Exen coldly eyed Jian Wushuang. Let's hear how well go about this gamble fight first, suggested Jian Wushuang with a faint smile. Though I've defeated you in the earlier fight, we were fighting based on the perception of laws and principles only, while you didn't even get the chance to display your true strength. Let's change the rules this time, where both of us can make our best effort without any scruples in this battle. You can fully display your divine power and various techniques. How about that? Are you asking me to do my best? Wu Xin's eyes narrowed. He had confidence in his status and abilities as Heaven Ultimate God after all. Although Jian Wushuang earlier defeated him, he had been maintaining his divine power at the peak Earth Ultimate God level while not using his many methods and techniques, purely competing based on the perception of laws. If he was able to go all out without restrictions, how many divine elixir pills would you like to bet on in this battle? Wu Exen asked. We bet on 500 divine elixir pills just now, so we have to do at least 1,000 divine elixir pills this time, said Jian Wushuang in a deep voice before stretching out a finger. 1,000 divine elixir pills. He actually wanted to bet more, but he was worried betting too many divine elixir pills would scare Wu Exen off and made him reluctant to fight. Wu Xin's face sank slightly when he heard the 1,000 divine elixir pills bet and said, I can't fork out 1,000 divine elixir pills. He was telling the truth, as he had lost 500 divine elixir pills, which was all he had. It was impossible for him to further take out 1,000 divine elixir pills. However, Wu Exen, go ahead and agree with him, said a gentle voice. The black-robed old man approached alongside Palace Keeper Xizhen. Elder Teng, Wu Exen, Ancient Witch, and Leng Xing immediately made obeisance respectfully. Palace Keeper Xizhen. The many expert disciples of the Sacred Palace also made obeisance to the Palace Keeper Xizhen. 8,000 divine elixir pills is nothing for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. You just have to do your best, said the black-robed old man. Yes, Wu Exen nodded and immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. We're fine with 1,000 divine elixir pills. Let's fight. Sure, I'm ready. Jian Wushuang beckoned to Wu Exen. Anger was brewing in Wu Xin's eyes as his unbridled heavenly ultimate god divine power finally erupted. His evolving sky godly staff, which had gone dim after colliding several times with Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation, lit up once again with much stronger power and brightness than before. Wu Xin's divine body also began to change at the same time. He was originally the size of a normal human, but had very quickly grown and soared to nearly 5 yards tall, while his skin and hair had completely turned purple, such that even his pupils were dazzling in a strange purply luster. An inexhaustible purply divine power surrounded him, and he looked like a tall purple demon deity. This is one of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's 6 secret techniques, Purple Blood Demon Deity. Based on Wu Xin's divine power breath, he has practiced it up to the secret technique's 3rd volume. Amazing! Palace Keeper Sijin was admiring the purple blood demon deity that Wu Exan formed. Palace Keeper Sijin had seen some of Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's top-secret techniques. An ordinary primary-level heaven ultimate god was usually able to practice up to the second volume of the purple blood demon deity secret technique, but Wu Exan had made it to the third volume, which only spoke volumes of his extraordinary talent. He was originally a primary-level heaven ultimate god with a solid foundation and extremely powerful divine power. His combat prowess is comparable to a high-level heaven ultimate god now that he has turned into a purple blood demon deity, which skyrocketed his overall strength on top of coupling with his perception of space-time law and evolving sky godly staff. Palace Keeper Sijin said in a low voice. Wu Exan was indeed emanating a powerful divine power at that instance, which obviously exceeded the powers of a primary-level heaven ultimate god. Moreover, Wuxin had also fought against a high-level heaven ultimate god before. Although he was defeated in that battle, the fight that had carried on for a long time only further proved his fighting capabilities against high-level heaven ultimate gods. He was not shocked or frightened by the 1,000 divine elixir pills that Jian Wushuang bet upon having such powerful strength as his backing. Jin, you're so full of yourself. Wuxin's purple eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Jian Wushuang and spoke with a loud voice. Maybe. Jian Wushuang merely smiled faintly with a calm expression. Humph. Wu Exan did not waste more time talking as he snorted and fiercely charged forward. Buzz. There were almost 1,000 apparitions in action once again. The 5-yard-tall purple blood demon deity apparition flooded all corners of the battlefield, while the evolving sky godly staff turned into a stream of purply golden fleeting light in the battlefield's center, with a long tail dragging its back whilst it fiercely launched at Jian Wushuang. Wu Exan had previously only used the power of a peak earth ultimate god to perform the same method. The purple golden fleeting light's penetrating power was several-fold stronger than before after he used much stronger divine power to perform the same technique. Too strong, this power is way too strong. I think such terrifying power is on par with a high-level heaven ultimate god's power. How could Jian Yi parry off the attack? He'll lose for sure. Definitely. I don't even know why Jian Yi is so courageous. How dare Jian Yi challenge Wu Exan, who is giving his all in the fight? He even bet 1,000 divine elixir pills. Many experts from the Sacred Palace who gathered around secretly marveled at Wu Xin's skill. All of them felt an irresistible power from the purply gold fleeting light Wu Exan displayed. Its power was extremely strong. However, Jian Wushuang merely smiled faintly when he looked at the densely packed purple blood demon deity apparitions before him and the purply gold fleeting light that came swooping down at him. With a wave of his hand, space-time strangulation. Buzz. The world was shaken up. A huge strangling force instantly exploded and engulfed the entire battlefield.